Chapter 841-Shipbuilding. The next day. The sun was shining brightly, and the female soldiers of Daughter's Island went out to patrol the sea as always to prevent the surrounding waters from being attacked by the enemy. Of course, with Li Ang's presence, they wouldn't feel too nervous. It's just that as a soldier, the vigilance that one should have is still essential. After all, no one knows if there will be some desperate desperados who will attack them. These people are the people who need to be treated with the most caution. Early in the morning. In the palace. After Li Ang and the girls had breakfast, he came up with an idea: let's make a boat. Shipbuilding. Why, are the warships we're using bad? Tina was very puzzled and could not help asking. The warship is not bad, but the performance is not enough. The stability of a ship I want to build must be guaranteed. Because, I still want to go to the bottom of the sea. If it is a warship, it will be a little troublesome. I am afraid that it may fall apart before it enters the seabed. In order to ensure the reliability of the ship, it must be made of the best materials. Inferior ships are more dangerous when they enter the bottom of the sea. I am immune to the water pressure on the bottom of the sea, but if it's you, it's not necessarily the case. Quote. Li Ang told his thoughts and said slowly. Is that so? That really has to make a better boat. Tautu nodded in agreement. The material of the warship is not inferior, but it is still too far from the top material. If you want to go to the bottom of the 237, but also to ensure the safety index, you can only use better materials to make a better performance ship. Where to find materials? Hancock's beautiful eyes flashed, and he was the first to ask. Since you want to make the best boat, you have to find the best material. Known as the best wood for shipbuilding, it is the branches of the Adam tree. Adam wood is very tough and can admit that even extremely strong pressure will not destroy it. According to legend, Roger's ship was made of Adamwood. This material, quite rare, is basically priceless. It's easier said than done to find this material to build ships. Treasure tree Adam. Shalulia Palace's pink lips parted slightly, and she said in a low voice. Oh, I almost forgot. Li Ang showed a smile, looked at Zalulia Palace beside him, and said, you should have seen it, right? Yeah. Shalulia Palace nodded lightly and said, in the treasure house of Mary Jo, AJED, there are a lot of treasure trees Adam. But the area is not very large. If it is used to make a ship, it is not enough. Quote. That's a pity. Li Ang shook his head and sighed slightly. He has no doubts about the authenticity of these topics in Zalulia Palace. After all, the other party's identity is a Tianlong person after all, so he will naturally have seen many big scenes. Treasure tree Adam is very rare, but as a Tianlong, she has seen a lot. Khalifa, how about you? Li Ang turned his eyes to Khalifa and asked. Khalifa has stayed in the Seven Waters for a while, where it is known as the Kingdom of Shipbuilding. Naturally, if there is a treasure tree Adam, the probability of appearing there is also the greatest. Khalifa shook her hair and shook her head. I found it before, but now, it should be gone. It's been a long time since I left the Seven Waters. That's true. If you build a ship, you can go to the capital of Seven Waters. Li Ang nodded and laughed dumbly. No, it's more reliable for me to build the ship myself. You. All the girls were startled and looked at Li Ang suspiciously. Chapter 841-Shipbuilding. NLT, 29 and GT. All the girls were startled and looked at Li Ang suspiciously. It's not that they doubt the authenticity of Li Ang's words, but that there are too many things that Li Ang knows. What? Look down on your husband, me. Tell you. If there is a ranking of shipbuilding in this world, then, your husband and I, deserve to be ranked first. Li Ang has a system, and naturally has full confidence. With systematic blessing, he has long been able to build ships. Moreover, the ships he made are definitely far superior to everyone in this world. Even, it is not impossible to copy Pluto into another one. Hades, one of the three ancient weapons. Known as the most ferocious ship in the world, it can destroy an island with one shot. It is extremely powerful and terrifying. Really or not? Perona pouted and asked cutely and charmingly. Don't believe it? Then you have to be optimistic. After I find the materials, I will let you see. Your husband and my shipbuilding skills are not just talk. Liang said with a confident smile. Where do I go to find materials? Taotu pondered for a while and asked again. The biggest question at the moment is where to find such precious materials to build ships. I'll ask, hopefully, the people over there have a way. Liang thought for a while, then took out the phone and dialed. Doflamingo's voice came from the opposite side. Hello. I'm the clown. I'm Liang. Liang's face was calm, and he said lightly, I want to ask you something, can you help me find a damu? I want to build a boat. Mr. Liang, are you going to build a ship to go to sea? Doflamingo was obviously shocked, and then said, it's just that the material of atom wood is really very rare. Almost people who go to sea are looking for this material to make their own boats. Just say it directly, can you find a quantity of atom wood to make an entire ship? Liang didn't say much, just asked clearly. Mr. Liang, I think your thinking has entered a misunderstanding. Doflamingo explained, you don't have to have a huge amount of Adam wood to make a ship. Who can afford it? What do you mean? Liang's eyes narrowed slightly, and he had some guesses. That's right. Doflamingo said solemnly, many ships are called Adamwood. But in fact, it's impossible to use Adamwood everywhere. Such a price is very expensive. After all, Adamwood is a material that all people who go to sea in the world are pursuing. Even if someone accidentally obtains it, it may not be sold. This has caused the problem that the demand is very large, but the goods are very small. Quote. Even the ship of One Piece Roger only incorporates a part of the material of atom wood. No, the whole ship is made of atom wood. Finished talking. Liang was stunned, nodded and smiled. I see. Can you find atom? Difficult. Doflamingo was silent for a moment. Okay, so be it. Liang didn't have too much nonsense, ready to hang up the phone bug. The opposite Doflamingo hurriedly said, Mr. Liang, if I find it, I will notify you as soon as possible. Then trouble you. After Liang hung up the phone, he immediately looked at Zalulia Palace and said with a smile, how big is Adamwood in the warehouse you mentioned? He was also slightly relieved to learn that the entire ship was not made of all Adamwood as the material. It would be too expensive to use Adamwood for the entire ship. Moreover, not to mention the issue of cost, whether it is possible to gather Adamwood of such a huge size is also a huge problem. Chapter 842-Keel. And Doflamingo's remarks also let Liang not have to worry about the material problem for the time being. As long as Adamwood is not too big, he can start from Zaluria Palace. If it is said that the rarest thing in the world, where can you see it? It is undoubtedly the Holy Land Mary Joa. Tianlong people can't do anything else, but the ability to collect precious things is very powerful. Materials like the treasure tree atom can naturally be found in the Holy Land Mary Joa, which is inevitable. With the urine nature of the Tianlong people, the treasure tree atom will definitely be collected. Possibly, atom, the treasure tree circulating in the sea, is only 20%. More, it is from the hands of Tianlong people. Yes, about 20 kilograms. Shalulia Palace thought for a while and said slowly. 20 kilograms. Is that enough? Liang narrowed his eyes slightly, feeling a little suspicious. I don't know, can these 20 kilograms make a boat? If all use the material of Baoshu atom, it is naturally impossible. But fortunately, after Doflamingo's reminder, he understood that the entire ship was not all made of Adamwood. Among them, many other materials will definitely be mixed. Those materials can be slightly inferior, but the main material is atom wood. Enough? Shalulia Palace asked weakly. I don't know, but it's better than nothing. 20 kilograms is only 20 kilograms. If it's not enough, then I'll find other materials, and mix them together. Presumably, the quality will not be too far off. Quote. Li Ying's face was calm and he said slowly. Then I'll call the phone bugs and have them bring a damwood over. Shalulia Palace thought for a while and said. A long time ago, Li Ying did not limit her ability to dial the phone bug. Needless to say now, Li Ying told her to go, she couldn't leave no matter what. She has been deeply dependent on Li Ying, and it is impossible to be separated from Li Ying again. If they are separated, this is really a great torture for her. After the phone worm dialed, it quickly hung up. Resolute, Shalulia Palace's affairs are still quite straightforward. She looked at Li Ying, nodded and said, it's already done. Probably, within 3 days, someone will send the materials. But, is this 20 kilograms really enough? Probably, it's not enough. Li Ying shook his head and said slowly. 20 kilograms want to build a boat. At least, it is possible to double it tenfold. Unless, just make some rafts, but make rafts out of atom wood. Isn't this a brain disease? What do you use to fill in the rest of the material? Hancock's beautiful eyes flashed and asked. I'll think about it. Li Ying rubbed his temples and thought. Atom wood is only 20 kilograms, and it is definitely not enough to make a boat. It can only be integrated into other materials, and then only in a boat. All using atom wood is not realistic at all. Even the pirate King Roger, the entire ship is not all made of adamwood. He traveled all over the sea, but he couldn't gather adamwood into a single ship. It can be seen how difficult it is to find adamu. If not, let's ask again. Li Ying laughed dryly and called Doflamingo's phone again. His knowledge of shipbuilding materials is limited. Are you sure you can build ships? Hancock and the others looked at Li Ying suspiciously and asked. I don't even know the materials, is it really reliable to build a ship? This is so true that they can't believe it. Don't interrupt. Chapter 842-Keel. And GT, page 1/2. Please click the next page to continue reading. And LT, 31 and GT. Don't interrupt. Li Ying glanced at the Hancock girls with dissatisfaction and said. After the phone worm dialed. Doflamingo was very respectful. Mr. Li Ying. It's me, by the way, I want to ask. 20 kilograms of atom wood, plus what material is better for boat building? 20 kilos. Doflamingo was visibly taken aback. Obviously, he himself could not have predicted that in the blink of an eye, Li Ying actually got so many adamwood. A long time. Doflamingo replied. If possible, it can be blended with mulberry wood, which is a little lower than atom wood, or sky redwood. Are there any other options? Li Ying asked again and said. Yes, but this material is rarer than atom wood. Moreover, if atom wood is mixed with this material, I'm afraid it will be more stable than a boat made of atom wood. Oh, what material is that? Li Ying was surprised. Is there any better material than atom wood? The keel. Doflamingo pondered for a while, and said slowly, if it is a keel, and adding adamwood, I think the boat will be number 1 in the world. It's a pity that the keel is too rare, even in the true sense of the word. Dragons are hard to see. The dragons mentioned here are not those strange dragons, but the real dragons. In addition to making boats, the keel can also be used as a weapon, and can even be ground into powder for consumption, which can prolong life and increase the vitality of the body. Although it is impossible to live forever, but taking a little bit of it can make people live a few more years. Therefore, dragons are rare, and keels are even rarer. Once they appear, they are also the target of being robbed. Finished talking. Li Ying's face froze, but he didn't expect to use this rarer material than atom wood. Keel. If ground into powder, it can be used as a medicinal material. If he really got the keel, he might not be willing to use it to make a boat. After all, the effect of grinding into powder is obviously more tempting. I see. Li Ying hung up the phone bug and leaned back on the sofa, lost in thought. What Doflamingo said just now was also heard by the girls. Keel. They have never seen, really, dragons. Suddenly, Li Ang's head flashed, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. If it is there, perhaps, there really is a dragon. This is a real dragon. Named, Millennium Dragon. I don't know, have those 1,000-year-old dragons returned to their dragon's nest? We are going to the East China Sea. Li Ang narrowed his eyes slightly and said with a smile. The Millennium Dragon, where it appears, is the East China Sea. If you want to find the keel, then you have to go to the East China Sea to get the final result. It is too hard to find a true dragon in the Great Waterway. It might be better to go to the East China Sea to try your luck. Maybe, you might actually encounter a 1,000-year-old dragon. To the East China Sea. Hancock was the first to ask, is there a dragon in the East China Sea? It may be, or it may not. Even if it's a long trip, it's not bad. With a smile on his face, Li Ang suggested, of course, if I go to the East China Sea alone, the speed will be faster. If you don't go, then I will go to the keel alone. Who said we weren't going? The girls rolled their eyes and said quickly. They were really afraid that Li Ang would suddenly disappear, and if they were asked to wait here, they couldn't wait. Chapter 843 _ Journey to the East China Sea. Well, let's go to sea with warships temporarily. After Li Ang has decided, he is also ready to arrange the next time. He looked at Zaluria Palace and said, let's make arrangements first, and let those who sent Adamu hand over the materials to the people on Daughter Island. In our case, we will leave tomorrow. Yes. After Shalulia Palace nodded, she called the phone bug again. A lot of things have been arranged, waiting for the arrival of tomorrow. The next day, Li Ang and others appeared on the coast. This time, everyone was dispatched. Li Ang, Hancock, Tautu, Tina, as well as Zaluria Palace, Khalifa, Corona, Kurla and others who were originally staying on Daughter Island, all rushed to the East China Sea. It still takes a certain amount of time to cross the area from the Daughter Island to the East China Sea. Unless, directly through the Windless Belt. This time, Li Ang planned to traverse the Windless Belt directly. Like Garp, returning from the Windless Belt to the East China Sea would be much faster. Although there will be Sea Kings, for Li Ang, Sea Kings are really nothing to be afraid of. A group of female fighters were on the coast, watching Li Ang and others leave, some worrying about gains and losses. In the blink of an eye, Lord Snakeji in their minds had to leave here again. However, under the words of the mother-in-law, everyone returned to their respective positions. With Li Ang's protection, to tell the truth, no one dared to do anything to Daughter Island. Just need to prevent some stunned greens. And some stunned young people. Don't worry, the soldiers of Daughter's Island are not vegetarians. See. A warship sailed slowly, pushing away the seawater on both sides, causing ripples. They finally left Daughter Island. Corona floated in the air, exhaling heavily. In the days on Daughter Island, without Li Ang's company, they naturally felt that life was very boring. It was not a few days before Hancock returned to Daughter Island, and he left again, and he was quite comfortable with it, without much reluctance. Perhaps, she also learned that Li Ang's reputation shocked the world. The people around don't dare to do anything to Daughter Island. Therefore, Hancock, the king, naturally relaxed. In this line, we crossed from the Windless Belt. Li Ang said with a calm face, steering the rudder. Passing through the Windless Belt is not something that an ordinary boat can do. It just so happened that what he was controlling was a warship, and the warship used some special techniques in the position of the hull card, so that the Sea Kings could not easily detect it. Therefore, it is not as difficult for the Navy to cross the Windless Belt as it is for the pirates. Of course, the Navy has not disclosed such technology. Only some people know about it. If it is made public, then everyone in this sea area has developed such a technology, and the 4 sea areas in the Great Waterway can travel freely, which is probably incredible. Although there are sea kings in the windless zone, it is also the most speed-saving. Taotu nodded and asked softly, "So, which island in the East China Sea are we going to this time?" She believes that Liang has a goal. For someone like Liang who is strategizing, her trust in Liang is very obvious. Battleship Island. Liang said slowly with a smile. Battleship Island. Tina raised her brows, her pink lips parted slightly. I seem to have heard of this island from somewhere. However, I rarely come to the East China Sea, so I don't remember this. Battleship Island, rumor has it that there is a dragon. Liang explained with a smile. Chapter 843 _ Journey to the East China Sea. NLT, 33 and GT. Liang explained with a smile. It's not fake, it's real. Hancock and others also showed a bit of surprise and asked. There are many lives like dragons. In the New World, there are many dragons, but these dragons. In the eyes of some people, it is not really a dragon. It's just a very rare life. A real dragon can live for thousands of years. This is the dragon in the true sense, and also the goal of Liang's line, the keel of the Millennium Dragon. I just hope that this line of work will not come back without success. Since there are rumors, it is naturally impossible to make grounds. It's just that people haven't discovered it. It doesn't mean that there is no dragon. Liang continued, looking at the sea in front of him. AJBI, the dragon I was looking for was the real dragon. It's called the Millennium Dragon. Millennium Dragon. Can it live for 1,000 years? The girls were shocked and could not help asking. Even if they are powerful, they can't imagine what it means to live 1,000 years. This is obviously an age that is difficult for even plants to reach. But is it really possible for an animal to do this? If this is the case, the keel of the 1,000-year-old dragon really has extremely terrifying energy. After all, a dragon that has lived for thousands of years is full of treasures. Wait. Tina's eyes flickered and she said, I remembered it, Battleship Island. Before, it was rumored that a 1,000-year-old dragon appeared there, and the Navy dispatched manpower and material resources. However, it was unsuccessful in the end, and I didn't take it seriously at the time. But I didn't expect that the 1,000-year-old dragon really existed on that island. All kinds of news are unbelievable. Finished talking. Hancock and others were also deeply surprised. The Navy has also done it. Yes, I heard that if you eat keel, you can live forever. Tina laughed and shook her head. Immortality is naturally false, but it is very possible to prolong life and enhance vitality. After all, in the final analysis, this is also a 1,000-year-old dragon, and a dragon that can live for 1,000 years is naturally extraordinary. However, this is only a rumor, and whether it is true or not needs to be verified. A 1,000-year-old dragon can really live 1,000 years. This kind of thing can only be judged by seeing it with your own eyes. Many times, names do not represent an animal's true abilities. For example, some strange plants that Liang had seen before, such as smallpox, man-eating vines, etc., were never seen to be buried in the sky or eaten by people. It's just that it's called by that name. But at least the 1,000-year-old dragon can survive several times longer than humans. Immortal. That's really funny. Hancock and others also laughed. If you say that you can live for hundreds of years, you can still accept it. But if you live forever, it's too fake. Yes, in this world, even plants cannot live forever. Who can live forever? It is rumored that using the fruit of surgery can also be immortal, but the fruit of surgery has never appeared like this once. Why, there have never been rumors of some immortal people. Quote. The girls started talking. For immortality, they naturally sneered. Since it is life, there is a day when it will end. Immortality only exists in people's beautiful fantasy. However, they didn't know that in Liang's place, the possibility of immortality really existed. After all, he has a system, and his vitality is very strong. Moreover, holding the first-generation ghost, it can devour the blood of others and turn it into its own vitality. In this way, there is no need to worry about the problem of aging, and even the cells will continue to rejuvenate, and the vitality will be very strong. NLT 34 and GT. Chapter 844 arrive in the East China Sea. Thinking of this, Li Ang couldn't help but glance at the girls. He was thinking about whether he could let the first-generation ghost to transfer his vitality to others. In this way, there is no need to worry about the problem that the girls will age. In this regard, the first generation of ghosts is simply the most terrifying sword in the world. The ability of the supreme speed, knife. Obviously, the first generation of ghosts went directly beyond the scope of the supreme sword and reached another realm. With Li Ang, it is very suitable. Both of them are terrifying beings above the ordinary class. Forget it, it's still too early to think about it now. They are all at a good age for their youth. Li Ang shook his head and looked at the delicate faces of Hancock's girls. Their skin is white as jade, flawless, and the breath of youth permeated. The figure is devilish, but it has a more lively sense of youth than a girl. Such a woman still needs to regain her youth. Unless, after 10 or 8 years, perhaps, the years will leave a trace on their faces. But at that time, the Times did not know what it was like. The entire warship left from Daughter Island. Directly across the windless belt. In a blink of an eye. 3 days have passed. Where are we now? Tina looked at the surrounding sea area and couldn't help asking. There is no reference here, so it is naturally impossible to judge which sea area is here. However, there is no wind direction here, and it is most likely an area of the windless belt. They still haven't left the windless belt and I can't tell. This should be the middle of the windless belt. After crossing this windless belt, we will be able to enter the East China Sea smoothly. Li Ang pondered for a while, and said while steering the rudder. As an excellent navigator, he naturally knows a lot of knowledge points for judging the location. These are all directly instilled into his head by the system. It doesn't take much effort to think about it. So soon. Hancock and others were deeply surprised. Only Tautu and Tina felt that it was normal. It was naturally much faster to cross the other 4 seas from the windless belt, so they could omit the journey in the middle. Shalulia Palace also had a deep understanding, and nodded calmly. As a Tianlong person, she has not been on a warship once or twice. The warship she rides is still the best. She has also experienced this kind of thing across the windless belt many times. Come on, go on, and you'll be traversing this windless belt soon. Li Ang said with a smile. Suddenly, his eyes flashed brightly, and he said with a smile, "It seems that there are guests." Whoa! The sea splashed up. A sea king suddenly appeared with a huge forehead, looking down at Li Ang and other small humans from a high altitude. His eyes were blood-red and demonic, exuding a terrifying aura. Ow! It roared, and the surrounding sea water was thrown into waves. The waves rolled, and the entire warship rippled on the sea, like a leaf ship, and there were signs that it might fall at any time. After walking halfway, we met the Sea King class. Our luck is still very good. Li Ang's face was calm and very relaxed, said. Warships can avoid the discovery of Sea Kings, but it does not mean that they will not be 100% aware of Sea Kings. Occasionally, there will be some individual exceptions. For example, the situation that Li Ang is facing now. It's not that the capabilities of the warships are malfunctioning, but that the Sea Kings accidentally discovered traces of their existence, so they surfaced directly to prepare to attack them. Husband, do you want to do it? Hancock looked at Li Ang sweetly and asked with a smile. Chapter 844 arrived in the East China Sea. NLT 35 and GT. Hancock looked at Li Ang sweetly and asked with a smile. Go ahead and deal with it as soon as possible. Then, rush to the East China Sea at full speed. It's a waste of time to let these Sea Kings block our way. Next, if you see one who dares to come forward, just kill it. Li Ang controlled the rudder with both hands, and said with a flat expression. Received. Hancock looked a little excited, turned around, and looked at this huge sea king, and there was a bit of cold light flashing. Her delicate and pretty face was icy cold without any emotion. Dare to stand in the way? Then you will die here. Hancock's mouth moved slightly, and he said softly. After she finished speaking, she directly activated the fruit ability, touched her red lips with her slender fingers, raised her left hand, pulled up her right hand, and put my arrows on her right hand. Let it go. Hancock released his right hand, and the red arrows attacked fiercely, successfully hitting this huge sea king. Call out, call out, call out. The arrow attacked, directly turning the sea kings into stone, and the whole body was petrified. Whoa! The sea water raised waves, and a sea king sank into the bottom of the sea like this. And the fruit ability has dissipated, and this sea king has appeared again. 0 katakana middle dot 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 katakana middle dot. It felt that it was actually attacked by a very small human being in front of it, and the anger in its heart was more vigorously burning and boiling. Let me come. Tautu held a saber and said with a smile. Devil fruit is really not very useful here. Yeah. Hancock nodded slightly, feeling nothing. Soon. Tautu took out a knife, and the sea kings also launched an angry blow. Their fangs were exposed, and they violently attacked the position of the warship. Die! Peach Rabbit's eyes flashed a bit of killing intent, holding a saber, fiercely urged a slash. Call out! The slash was extremely fierce, with a dazzling light, and it disappeared in a flash. Ellipsis 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 ellipsis. Puff! The entire Sea King class was cut in two, and blood splashed up, dyeing the sea red. Let's go. After Liang saw that the Sea Kings were killed, there was no disturbance in his heart, and he continued to control the rudder and gradually left this sea area. Blood will attract more Sea Kings to come. To avoid wasting time, Liang quickly controlled the warship to leave the sea area. 3 days later. Finally, Liang and others successfully arrived at the edge of the windless belt. After crossing this windless belt, the place they are about to arrive is naturally the destination of their trip, the East China Sea. Our speed seems to be too fast. Tina's pink lips parted slightly, and she felt a little surprised. In particular, Hancock, Perona and others continued to say, if we sail according to our schedule, I'm afraid that we may not be able to reach the East China Sea from Daughter Island in a month. This is also understandable. The normal sailing is from Daughter Island, rushing to Upside Down Mountain one after another, and then from Upside Down Mountain, into the remaining 4 sea areas. If you are crossing the windless belt, these problems do not exist. It is very straightforward, showing a straight line, crossing the pass from the windless belt, without wasting any time. Apart from the fact that some Sea Kings appeared in the middle, there was not much trouble. This is also normal. There are very few boats in the windless zone. Basically, only warships have this capability. And most pirates sail according to the normal route. Therefore, in the windless zone, there are a large number of Sea Kings, but the number of pirate ships cannot see anyone at all, which is very rare. NLT, 36 and GT. Chapter 845 Battleship Island. So, the science and technology of the Navy headquarters is still in place. Liang also smiled and said. According to the judgment, the sea area ahead, after leaving the windless belt, is already the East China Sea. A few minutes later, the warship officially stepped out of the windless belt. Looking back, there were still no ships in the windless belt behind him. Only one warship stepped out of the windless belt. The breeze was blowing, which made Liang and others feel a little more comfortable. I haven't felt the wind blow for a long time, Hancock said with a smile. Her jet black hair was rolled up, revealing her delicate and flawless facial features, which was intoxicatingly beautiful. The girls also narrowed their eyes slightly, feeling the breeze, which was very refreshing. Is this the East China Sea? Hancock's red lips parted slightly, looking at the sea in front of him, and said in a low voice. Yeah, this is the East China Sea. It took less than a week to travel from Daughter's Island to the East China Sea. It's an exaggerated speed. Kurla was also deeply surprised, said. As a revolutionary army, she is also very envious of the naval warships. Finally, she experienced the feeling of riding in the Navy today. Come on, let's go to the target location this time, Li Ang said with a smile. Warship Island is naturally the location of his target. 657 pointer that had already been prepared, and the record pointer was specifically aimed at Warship Island. A record pointer that he bought specifically to go to Battleship Island. So, on this journey, the direction is not wrong at all. All the way unimpeded, in addition to encountering some sea kings, even pirate ships are rarely seen, and they arrived in the area of the East China Sea. This piece is known as the weakest sea area. In the East China Sea, there are pirates with bounties of hundreds of millions, which are already very terrifying overlords. Even a pirate of 20 to 30 million berries can guard one side. This is the East China Sea, a sea area with generally weaker strength. If these pirates enter the Great Waterway, they will definitely be killed in seconds. But in the East China Sea, they can make a fortune. Even the navy stationed in the East China Sea can't shake these big pirates of 20 to 30 million berries. That's right. The pirates with a bounty of 20 to 30 million berry are here, they are called the big pirates. In the Great Waterway, there are still many such pirates. In the New World, such a bounty pirate would not even be qualified to carry shoes for others. Battleship Island, really looking forward to it. Really, is there a dragon, Ajak? I'm so curious. Yeah, it's not a waste of time to see a real dragon in this life. Quote. The girls were deeply moved and spoke word by word. Li Ang, on the other hand, controlled the rudder and moved in the direction pointed by the recording pointer. In the cheerful chat of the girls, the entire warship, under the control of Li Ang, was getting further and further away from the windless belt. Battleship Island, a very remote island. In Li Ang's memory, this is also the place that the Straw Hat Pirates passed by. It stands to reason that the Millennium Dragon should have left the Battleship Island. But in order to try his luck, he still chose to come to Warship Island for a walk. Moreover, the main thing is that what he needs is not the living Millennium Dragon, what he needs is the keel of the Millennium Dragon. Just find the keel and that's enough. As for the living 1,000-year-old dragon, it is a pity for him to kill the keel of the dragon. Chapter 845 Battleship Island. NLT, 37 and GT. As for the living 1,000-year-old dragon, it is a pity for him to kill the keel of the dragon. The 1,000-year-old dragon is the darling of some heaven and earth, with spirituality. Such animals are very rare. If Li Ang starts to kill again, it will make such a species go extinct. Li Ang didn't intend to do this kind of thing. Therefore, if the keel of the Millennium Dragon can be found, then everything will be very happy. Of course. I heard that the Millennium Dragon will return to the dragon's nest before it dies, and after multiplying its offspring, it will give its life energy to its offspring before dying. Therefore, the keels of many 1,000-year-old dragons are kept in the dragon cave and will not be exposed. After all, the Millennium Dragon is also wise. In their eyes, it doesn't matter if they die. However, if even their own keel is used, it is their greatest insult. It is for this reason that when the Millennium Dragon is about to realize that he is about to die, it will try his best to return to the dragon cave of the Millennium Dragon and die again. I would rather bury my bones in the ground than be found. If you can't find the keel of a 1,000-year-old dragon, you can only kill an adult 1,000-year-old dragon. Hope, since you are spiritual, don't let me go home empty-handed. Li Yang's face was calm and he thought to himself. He knows how rare the 1,000-year-old dragon keel is. But that's what made him even more reluctant to give up. It is not impossible to make a ship with a keel, cooperate with a damwood, and add his craftsmanship to make the world's first ship. If the material is sufficient, there is also a great chance to copy Pluto. A few days later. In front, there is an island. On the deck, Hancock's beautiful eyes flickered and reminded in a low voice. I saw it. Li Yang nodded and recorded the direction the pointer was pointing to, which was the island in front. If nothing else, this island is Warship Island. The legend of the 1,000-year-old dragon started from here and spread to the rest of the sea. Warship Island is where the news of the Millennium Dragon was first reported. The rest of the islands have never been rumored before. Although it is only a rumor, it may not be groundless. What's more, Li Yang knew deeply that the 1,000-year-old dragon really existed on this island. What is not guaranteed is whether the traces of the existence of the Millennium Dragon can still be found. But what is certain is that here, there are indeed 1,000-year-old dragons. Moreover, the Millennium Dragon also exists in reality. When the time is right, the entire sky will be covered by the Millennium Dragon. It's a pity that Li Yang felt that he didn't have the luck to see such a scene. Is this the Battleship Island? Corona, Khalifa and the others whispered to themselves. Seeing that the island in front was getting closer and closer, making them more and more excited. Does the Millennium Dragon really exist? They are naturally quite curious about this legendary species. This island is relatively inaccessible. Shalulia Palace spoke slowly, and before logging in, she had already observed the whole island. Into the eyes, all green forest. The entire island, 2/3 of its area, is covered by forests. If it is said that there is a 1,000-year-old dragon in it, it is very suitable for survival in this environment. Get ready, we're about to log ashore. Li Yang released the rudder, and the warship still sailed in a straight line. He looked at Gunkanjima's eyes, shining brightly, and a strong sense of anticipation could not be contained on his face. Chapter 846_Search. The area where the warship is gradually approaching the coast. Under the leadership of Li Yang, Hancock, Tautu and others stepped off the warship one after another and officially arrived at the coast of Warship Island. In front of you, you can see the forest, and the endless forest blocks the farther area, making it impossible to see the buildings in the distance. While Li Yang was fixing the anchor on the ground, he also stepped into the edge of the coast of Warship Island, stepping on the soft soil under his feet, which made him observe carefully. No part of the Battleship Island can be ignored. It is possible that some clues of the Millennium Dragon will remain on the ground, maybe. What is my husband doing? Hancock's beautiful eyes flickered. Looking at the scene where Li Yang was squatting on the ground to observe, he couldn't help asking. Look for clues. Li Yang's face was calm and he said slowly. He looked carefully at the soft soil on the ground, where many footprints were mixed, and there were residents living here. Although the number may not be many, at least, this is not a desert island. If it was a desert island, there would be no news of the Millennium Dragon. Aside. Hancock and others looked at Li Yang's serious and focused appearance, and did not disturb the other party. Instead, they also observed around, trying to find clues and information useful to Li Yang. This is. Suddenly, Perona held a feather in both hands, a little excited, and quickly floated to Li Yang's position. As if taking credit, he arrived in front of Li Yang and said, "Husband, I have found some important clues. Look." She hurriedly handed the feather on her hand to Li Yang, her expression undisguised with excitement. Hancock, Tautu, Tina and others also noticed it, and they all moved closer. What did you find? Feather. Perona was excited and answered truthfully. At the same time, Li Yang also took the feather from Perona and observed it carefully. The feathers are blue-blue, lighter in color, and not too rich. However, the area of this feather is very large. Basically, the area of the feather is similar to the opening of the palm. Nice job. Liang looked at Perona with a smile on his face, admiring it. After receiving Liang's appreciation, Perona's big eyes were curved into crescent moons, and her heart was overjoyed. Like a child who has been praised. Liang's admiration for his own woman is never stingy. What's more, this feather has an 80% chance of originating from the Millennium Dragon. Although Liang had never seen a real Millennium Dragon, it did not prevent him from feeling the majestic vitality contained in the feathers. Even though this feather has left the Millennium Dragon's body, it still hasn't rotted and withered, which can explain the problem. The huge vitality makes this feather look very extraordinary. Is this the Millennium Dragon? Hancock couldn't help it, probed over, his beautiful eyes flashed, and asked. There should be nothing wrong. We continue to search inside. Presumably, more clues will be collected. Liang put away the feathers, nodded, looked at the forest in front of him, and said. Yeah. The girls nodded, excited. Unexpectedly, when I came to Warship Island, I found a feather of a 1,000-year-old dragon. That's right, good luck. The luck of this line really makes them excited. Chapter 846_search. NLT, 39 and GT. The luck of this line really makes them excited. After encountering such a good thing in the first place, will the following events be even more difficult? Liang walked ahead, pushed aside some grass, and entered the forest step by step. Behind him, the Hancock girls followed closely and did not leave the team. Except for the Zaluria Palace, the rest of the staff here are all very powerful. In the Great Waterway, a sea area can be suppressed. Not to mention, this is just the East China Sea. In the East China Sea, all the girls behind Liang, except for the Sha Lulia Palace, are absolutely qualified to be an overlord in the East China Sea. Perona, Kurla, Khalifa and others all have impressive strength. In particular, there are also many capable ones. And Hancock, Tautu, and Tina, needless to say, their strength is very tyrannical even in the Great Channel. Here in the East China Sea, basically standing at the top of the East China Sea. Unless the East China Sea attracts outsiders, otherwise, Hancock and Tautu will basically be able to sweep through the pirates and smash the East China Sea to the bottom, and there will be no enemies who can compete. Inside the forest, the chirping of some birds seemed very clear. 0 katakana middle dot 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 katakana middle dot. Liang not only observed the soft soil on the ground, but also carefully observed the trees and other aspects, and did not miss any suspicious clues. And Hancock, Perona and other women behind him also joined the search team. There is a pattern, follow Liang's actions to repeat it again. Here, another feather. Khalifa's pretty face beamed with joy, and she quickly opened her red lips and said softly. Another feather. The girls were secretly surprised. I was afraid that, in their line, they were going to see the real dragon. As soon as I stepped on the island, I got 2 feathers that were suspected of being a 1,000-year-old dragon. This was a good start. I'll see. Liang moved to Khalifa's position and took the feather. It was still the same color, cyan, faint, but it made him a little more dignified. On this feather, he saw a hint of bright red. If nothing else, this feather was stained with blood. So, are the bloodstains human, or the Millennium Dragon itself? There is blood. Khalifa also found out, raised her brows and said. Time shouldn't be too far away. If nothing else, This 1,000-year-old dragon will never drop its feathers more than a month ago. No matter how strong its vitality, I'm afraid it won't be able to do it. This feather should have fallen within the last month. That is to say, the Millennium Dragon has appeared on this island within this month. Li Ang analyzed it, his eyes became more serious, and he said, the 1,000-year-old dragons appear one after another. Is this island too special? Otherwise, it is difficult to explain why the traces of the Millennium Dragon appeared one after another here. At the beginning, the Millennium Dragon was too old because it was too old, and it was normal to be unable to move in the cave here. But since the old dragon is gone, and there are still traces of the 1,000-year-old dragon, it can be shown that this island is very extraordinary. Analyzed like this. The old dragon of the year may not necessarily choose this island as a habitat because of aging. The site can prove the magic of this island. What is it that attracts the Millennium Dragon? Chapter 847 _ The Feather of the Millennium Dragon. Is this a feather from the same Millennium Dragon? At this moment, Tina's pink lips moved slightly and she couldn't help asking. This sentence made Li Ang wake up instantly. Just now, he subconsciously believed that the two feathers came from the same 1,000-year-old dragon. But Tina's words instantly woke him up. He carefully compared the two feathers. One big and one small. The conclusion of the comparison is that there is a 70% chance that it is from the same Millennium Dragon, but there is also a 30% chance that it is different. If it is different, it means that this island is more than just a 1,000-year-old dragon. Go on. Li Ang paused in his heart, and his face became more and more serious, said. He looked at the forest in front of him and gradually went deeper. Behind him, Hancock, Tautu and others followed closely, not falling out of the ranks. Tight, 627, followed. One after another, the third feather was found. Then, the fourth feather. About an hour later, Li Ang, Hancock and the others stayed in the middle of the forest. At this time, on the palm of his hand, I had 11 more feathers in total. Are the feathers of the Millennium Dragon so easy to find? This made Li Ang feel unreal for a while. If the Millennium Dragon was so easy to find, someone would have done it long ago. How could it be just rumors? It is because the Millennium Dragon is too mysterious, and because the number is rare, it is difficult for people to find it. But, what's the situation now? After a bell, there were already so many feathers found. If this is not enough to prove the fact that the Millennium Dragon exists on this island, then Li Ang really has no way to be sure. At least, now he can be sure. On this island, at least, there will be a 1,000-year-old dragon. Perhaps, more than one. Of course, this is just his guess. But a 1,000-year-old dragon definitely exists. As for which area it exists in, this is not something that Li Ang can know. Look for the residents of this island and see if there have been some strange things in the past month. If there are, it proves that these strange things are inextricably linked with the Millennium Dragon. Li Ang thought for a while and said. It's really about to find the Millennium Dragon. I'm looking forward to it. The life of the Millennium Dragon actually exists. Now that its feathers have been found, and the feathers fell within a month, it can explain a lot of problems. Of course, unless, within this month, it was robbed. But this possibility is not very large. Quote, if the Millennium Dragon is really taken away, the storm it will cause must be extraordinary. But in this sea area, there has never been such news. Quote. The girls chatted with each other and looked excited. About to see the legendary creature like the Millennium Dragon, their mood is naturally self-evident. Let's go, find a place where there are people, and inquire about the news. For us, the news of the last month is very important. Li Ang led the girls across the forest. Soon, in his line of sight, he saw the existence of a small village ahead. The area of the village is not very large, and it can be seen that the entire village originally belonged to the forest. However, they directly cut off the trees in the surrounding area and opened up an open area as a village. If the houses are arranged one by one, probably, there are still 100 households with a population. Chapter 847 The Feather of the Millennium Dragon. If the houses are arranged one by one, probably, there are still 100 households with a population. As for more, Li Ang can't guarantee it. On the street, there are also a lot of people coming and going. Warship Island, known as the island with the highest frequency of Millennium Dragons, naturally, there will be no shortage of people to come and observe. It's just that many parts are just in vain. Not everyone is as lucky as Li Ang, and in just one bell, he got a lot of things that belong to the 1,000-year-old dragon's feathers. It can only be said that Li Ang really had a bad luck to find so many feathers suspected of being a 1,000-year-old dragon. Getting closer and closer to the small village, it became more and more noisy. There are many outsiders, all for the Millennium Dragon. The news of the existence of the Millennium Dragon is basically no secret. It's just that no one has ever seen the Millennium Dragon. Many people came here because of its fame, but in the end they could only leave in despair. They couldn't even see the Millennium Dragon's feathers, so they left Warship Island. Wanting to see the Millennium Dragon is not so simple. Far and wide. Before Li Ang approached, he saw some people watching and talking in a low voice. Look, another group of people are here. Presumably, they are also here to find the Millennium Dragon. No, but, how can there be such a simple zero? Millennium Dragon, it's just a rumor. After so many years, there is no news that anyone has seen the Millennium Dragon. It's just, all along, there has been news that there is a 1,000-year-old dragon on the Warship Island. But in fact, who has seen the 1,000-year-old dragon? In my opinion, all this is just a pretense. Quote. A group of people talked in a low voice, and their expressions looked very down. Obviously, they all came here because they wanted to witness the 1,000-year-old dragon's demeanor. Of course, there are also many people who want to get the keel of the Millennium Dragon and realize the legendary immortality. But now they are only talking about the desperation. Because they can't even see the feathers of the Millennium Dragon, let alone find the Millennium Dragon. For them, even finding the feathers of the Millennium Dragon is an extravagant hope. And Li Ang's group, in their opinion, naturally came for the Millennium Dragon. To be precise, in addition to the famous local people, 90% of the people who log on to the Warship Island are for the Millennium Dragon. It can be seen that the prestige of the Millennium Dragon is very loud. Husband, are you going to inquire about the news? Tina's pink lips parted slightly, she smiled sweetly, and asked. No need, they are all outsiders just like us. If you want to inquire about news, naturally you have to find local residents, so that you can get some news that we don't know. Li Ang shook his head and said bluntly. These people, obviously like them, are not native residents of 4.1 Battleship Island. So, what useful news can you expect from these people? If the news was really useful, they would have taken action long ago, so why would they stare blankly here? That's right. Tina smiled and nodded. The number of outsiders is quite large. Visually, there are about 300 to 500 people. Almost the entire village was surrounded by water. Originally, the village was not very big, but the accumulation of so many people here made the village even more crowded and small. Li Ang took a look at the whole village, his eyes fixed on an old man holding a cane, his eyes flashed, a smile appeared, and he walked step by step. We'll keep up. Hancock's beautiful eyes flickered, and he whispered. They didn't show too much, they followed behind Li Ang and approached the old man's position. NLT, 42 and GT. Chapter 848-Legend. Old man, can I ask you something? With a smile on his face, Li Ang looked at the old woman in front of him and asked. White hair shows her age. And it took a while before she could see Li Ang's face clearly. After hearing Li Ang's voice, she smiled and said, You guys, are you also here to find the Millennium Dragon? Yes. Li Ang nodded and did not hide it. This is an obvious thing, even if he doesn't say it, the old woman must have guessed. 90% of those who can come to Warship Island are for the Millennium Dragon. This probability, the old woman is still clear in her heart. After all, she has lived here for decades, and if she didn't even know this, she wouldn't dare to call herself an aboriginal here. I take the liberty to ask, what are you looking for the Millennium Dragon for? The old woman looked at Liang and asked again. The keel. Liang looked directly at the old woman and continued. He didn't choose to deceive because it wasn't necessary. The keel, is it that direct? Old woman was surprised and said with a smile, you are the first young man who told me so directly that it was for the sake of the keel. The others were all thinking, saying there are other reasons to deceive me. The old lady. They may think that if I live on this island, I will regard the Millennium Dragon as a patron saint. Then, such things as taking keels are naturally not allowed on our island. So, they lied. But it's not like that. The Millennium Dragon is not the patron saint of our island. It's just an outsider, and we have never recognized its existence. Quote. The old woman ran in a row and said some of the connection between this village and the Millennium Dragon. It is said that 20 years ago, there was a hunter in the village who found a huge bird in the forest, and the whole village was shocked. All kinds of news spread out, and it was at that time. Over time, people like to call it a dragon, and it is still a 1,000-year-old dragon. This has created a situation where the Warship Island was originally deserted and gradually became lively. This situation has been maintained for a full 20 years. At that time, the old woman was still a middle-aged woman, and she gradually became an old man after listening to those rumors. It can be said that the relationship between the village and the Millennium Dragon is not hostile, but it is not friendly either. Presumably, this situation is unrelated to each other. The village never interfered with the Millennium Dragon, and the Millennium Dragon never appeared in the village. Therefore, some news about the Millennium Dragon has always been just a legend. It is said that if you eat the keel of a 1,000-year-old dragon, you will live forever. Old woman smiled without being perfunctory, and said, back then, there were some people in the village who were moved. Even they were confused by this legend. In the end, the 1,000-year-old dragon didn't see it. Instead, a few people died in the forest. Therefore, some ghostly people were awakened and dared not touch these things again. But, things are not over, just like what you can see in front of your eyes, young people. Year after year, countless people still come to Warship Island, just for the Millennium Dragon. But over the years, the people who died in the forest, countless. Quote. Is there any danger in the forest? Liang was surprised and asked. He traversed the forest all the way, but did not notice any danger. The forest is naturally dangerous. There are many deadly animals in it. Even experienced hunters will die in the forest if they are not careful. Chapter 848-Legend. NLT, 43 and GT. The forest is naturally dangerous. There are many deadly animals in it. Even experienced hunters will die in the forest if they are not careful. Old woman nodded and explained, the old hunters in our village also have a common management. Every year when there is a lot of traffic, it is forbidden to enter the forest to hunt. Oh, why? Liang narrowed his eyes slightly and asked. He felt as though he had captured some useful information. The forest can't hold too many people enter the forest, and big things will happen. Old woman's face became solemn, and she instructed seriously, young man, I advise you, during this time, there will be a lot of people. If you want to enter the forest, then wait for this time to pass. Otherwise, you will have big trouble. What's the trouble, can you tell me? Liang was slightly interested and asked. Seeing Liang's disapproval, the old woman sighed and said to herself, another young man who doesn't know what to call him. 0 katakana middle dot 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 0. She believed that Liang, like the usual young people, did not listen to advice and still ventured into the forest. But the end result is, of course, no exception. For our village, the forest is a very sacred existence. But if there are too many people, the noise will be too loud, which will arouse the wrath of the forest god. At that time, the god of the forest will give punishment, and all those who enter the forest will be punished. Some people are lucky enough to escape, but they will not live long. The old woman sighed, and she couldn't bear to see so many people dying. But every time, her advice was ignored by others. She has gotten used to it over the years. This is not surprising. There are always some people who want to go and get killed, and she can't stop them. It's better to let these people in. If they die, they deserve it. The god of the forest. Liang's expression became more and more strange. He never believed in the existence of God. If there is a God in this world, he is confident that he is God. If you say such outrageous words, if you say it out loud, you will be driven away by the old woman. Therefore, in order to avoid trouble, Liang did not say these words easily. But he dared to be interested in the existence of the god of the forest. What kind of existence dares to pretend to be a god? If he can go to an island, he can also exist as a god, there is no doubt. His strength is beyond the imagination of ordinary people, and as a god, there is nothing wrong with him. In his opinion, if there really is a forest god, it is just a powerful animal. Yes, the god of the forest will be angry. The old woman nodded solemnly and said. Aside. Hancock and Tautu and the girls looked a little suspicious. They are all people who have experienced many storms and waves, and they will definitely not believe in the existence of God. But in front of him, listening to the old woman's words, it seemed like it was real. Even if there is no God, there must be a powerful animal in the forest, that is, the God in the old woman's mouth. NLT 44 and GT. Chapter 849 _ The God of the Forest. Have you seen the God of the Forest? Liang asked with a smile on his face. God, how can mortals see it? The old woman frowned, dissatisfied with Liang's tone. Although there were no words that insulted God, this tone was obviously disrespectful to God. For someone like her, who has believed in the God of the forest for many years, it is the biggest discomfort. At this moment, Liang realized that the old woman was also a believer. If it is a believer, it will be a bit ugly. What's more, she is too old. If she distorts her belief in the God of the forest, I am afraid that her spirit will collapse directly. However, the information Liang wanted was almost the same. But, God of the forest. What the hell is that? Liang thought to himself, his eyes with a bit of interest. If he could, 6 or 7, he still wanted to try it out. What would it feel like to kill a god? Even if it is a forest god, it is not bad. In this world, even a cat or a dog can be called a god, which makes him a little uncomfortable. What can be called God? Even he didn't dare to call himself a god. How dare these strange things be called gods? If let him touch, he will let the so-called god of the forest understand why the flowers are so red. I don't know, is the blood of the gods bright red? Liang's eyes flashed brightly, and he secretly planned. The news he got from the old woman actually led to other secrets, which surprised him. This island, the most important thing is not the Millennium Dragon, but the god of the forest. What is the connection between the Millennium Dragon and the god of the forest? Liang said that it was very incomprehensible, but he got all the news he deserved. For the rest, he had to go out and find out in person. As for the so-called god of the forest, if it happens, he doesn't mind blowing up the opponent. Thanks for so much information. Li Ang's eyes flickered, looking at the old woman, said. Young man, if you don't listen to my advice, there's nothing I can do. If you die in the forest then, it's no one's fault. The old woman sighed and continued. Naturally, if I die, I'm going to kill myself. That's fair, isn't it? Li Ang narrowed his eyes slightly and said with a smile. The old woman was very surprised by his remarks. She glanced at Li Ang meaningfully and said, It seems that you are a capable person. Then I won't discourage you. If you want to find the Millennium Dragon, I suggest you gather some feathers first. After the old woman finished speaking, she was ready to leave. Li Ang said, What's the use of gathering feathers? The Millennium Dragon is very precious for its own things. Even feathers are no exception. As long as the amount is large, it will definitely appear and be recycled. After the old woman said this, she gradually left Li Ang's sight. So it is. Li Ang showed a smile and looked at the 1,000-year-old dragon feather in his hands with great interest. After gathering feathers, the Millennium Dragon will appear for recycling. In that case, it saves you having to look for it yourself. However, it would be a sin to kill a 1,000-year-old dragon. If there is a ready-made Millennium Dragon keel, he also doesn't want to kill a rare Millennium Dragon. Of course. If you really can't find the keel, you can only start from the living Millennium Dragon. Chapter 849 _ The God of the Forest. NGT, page 1/2. Please click the next page to continue reading. NLT, 45 NGT. If you really can't find the keel, you can only start from the living Millennium Dragon. Husband, you say, the God of the Forest, what is it? Hancock's beautiful eyes asked softly with a little curiosity. I don't know, but as we enter the forest, we should meet. Li Ang wiped his chin, but his expression did not fluctuate much. The so-called God of the forest should only be a powerful being. For him, no matter what kind of creature, if he provokes him, he just wants to blow up the opponent directly. Not to mention the God of the forest, even the God of the sea, he has nothing to fear. But this also requires the God of the sea. In the sea, who dares to call God? Only in such a small place, there are some small characters who dare to speak madly and claim to be gods. That's because this little character has not yet encountered some tough powerhouses. If he had encountered it, presumably, he would not dare to call himself a god again. That's right, no matter what it is, it's too arrogant to dare to call yourself a god. Perona's cute little face also showed a bit of resentment. She doesn't even dare to call herself a god. These little characters actually dare to call themselves gods, they are simply immortal. We've got the news we want. Next, let's get ready. Let's enter the forest again. First, look for the keel, and then, collect the feathers by the way. If the keel can't be found, then using the feathers can also lead out the Millennium Dragon. At that time, it will not be difficult to kill the dragon. Of course, if possible, I would like to get the corpse of a dragon directly, so that there is no need to kill. The existence of a 1,000-year-old dragon is very magical. It would be a pity to kill it. Li Ang said with a little emotion. That's right. The girls nodded lightly and said. Then let's go now. Tautu blinked his eyes and asked. Wait a minute. Suddenly, Li Ang showed a smile, looked in the direction of the crowd not far away, and said, someone wants to find a way for us. Might as well, if we follow behind them, there may be unexpected gains. They are planning to enter the forest en masse. Tina was a little surprised and asked. It's not just the simple answer of entering the forest. You see, occasionally some people carry a feather in their hands. Therefore, if the group has feathers, it will inevitably lead to the emergence of the Millennium Dragon. Unsurprisingly, they want to slaughter the dragons collectively. This is a new thing. I want to come, and they have already learned the news that collecting feathers can lead to the Millennium Dragon. Li Ang looked at the crowd. Some obscure people were holding the feathers of the Millennium Dragon in their hands. It can be seen from this. The number of people combined, it is not impossible to bring out the Millennium Dragon 1.4. A person may not have the courage to slay a dragon, but a group of people cannot be timid. Let's go to the theater too. Li Ang smiled and suggested. Yeah. The women had no objection. Immediately, under the leadership of Li Ang, the girls followed, gradually followed behind the crowd, and walked into the forest calmly. Not far away. The people in the village looked very strange as they watched a group of people walk into the forest. They have entered the forest again. Simply, I don't know whether to live or die. A strong man's eyes flashed a bit of anger and reprimanded. Since they don't listen to the advice and want to die, let them die. Their life and death, what do they do with us? Another middle-aged man said coldly. Chapter 850 Will the Millennium Dragon also suffer from hair loss? In the forest. Li Ang looked at the action of the numerous groups of people in front of him with a smile on his face, and the domineering spread of seeing and hearing, covering the surrounding area, and any disturbances, could not escape his perception. Beside him, Hancock, Tautu, Khalifa and others followed, observing the movement around him. Ahead, there was a commotion. The atmosphere was also a bit tense. By the way, will the Millennium Dragon really appear? There are so many of us, won't we scare it away? Do you think the Millennium Dragon is like your egg? So cowardly, even if there are many of us, as long as there are enough feathers, it will definitely appear. At that time, depending on their ability, whoever can slay the dragon, the keel will belong to the other party. If the others want the keel, they will have to pay the price to buy it. Everyone has the qualification to buy it once. Yes, in this way, everyone will not return without success. Dragon slayers can also reap a lot of benefits. This method is feasible. Quote. A group of people are talking, their expressions are full of excitement and excitement. It seems that they have expected the scene of being beheaded by them after the appearance of the Millennium Dragon in 09. Almost 90% of the people came for the keel. As for immortality, they just think about it, who can live forever? They never thought that there are immortal people in the world, but there are still people with longevity. For them, living a few hundred years old is already a very dreamy wish. In ordinary circumstances, it is basically impossible for a person to live a few hundred years. However, if you get a keel, it will naturally be different. It is for this reason that they are quite enthusiastic about the keel. Most of them are middle-aged and strong men who have not reached the stage of old age. Of course, some people want to come here to get rich overnight. As long as the keel is obtained, I believe that many people will buy it at a great price. The purchase of hundreds of millions of berry is not a big deal. The keel has a priceless value and is a truly rare item. Even if it sells tens of billions of berry, it is normal. Husband, do you think the Millennium Dragon will come? Tina's pink lips moved slightly, looking at Li Ang beside her, and asked. I don't know, but there should be a good chance. They have collected a lot of feathers, and I have a lot of feathers here. Although the number is not many, it is enough to attract the attention of the Millennium Dragon. Li Ang's face was calm and he said slowly. Whether it appears or not, he doesn't care too much. Even if the Millennium Dragon doesn't appear, he only needs to search in the forest once, and he will naturally know the result. Does the Millennium Dragon exist in the forest? This is also an unknown. But at least it can be guaranteed that within a month, there will definitely be a 1,000-year-old dragon here. As for whether it left in the end, it is unknown. Here's another feather. There was a hint of confusion ahead, and everyone was excited. It's here too. Wait, it's here too. There are feathers. Why, so many feathers are found here? A group of people was sensational, and their faces were full of excitement. What's the matter? Tautu's brows were slightly wrinkled, and he had some doubts. I always feel that things are a little weird. It's too strange to suddenly have so many thousand-year-old dragon feathers. Could it be that this millennium dragon has alopecia? Perona's big smart eyes blinked, her mind widened. Ah! The girls glanced at Perona a little weirdly. What exactly is in this little girl's head? Don't say it, it's possible. Chapter 850 _ Will the Millennium Dragon also suffer from hair loss? And GT, page 1/2. Please click the next page to continue reading. And LT, 47 and GT. Don't say it, it's possible. Li Ang smiled and said. You think so too? Hancock's face moved, and he couldn't help asking. Of course it's a joke. Li Ang couldn't help laughing, rubbed Hancock's hair, and explained, with the physical quality of the Millennium Dragon, it will suffer from alopecia. This is afraid to make people laugh. Even if the Millennium Dragon is old, it is still 1,000 years. Dragon. This kind of symptom is rare in humans. How could it appear in the Millennium Dragon? Finished talking. Hancock, Khalifa and others all rolled their eyes. Their feelings are fake. Perona's pretty face blushed slightly, and she whispered to herself, this may not be the case. She is still a little girl who still stubbornly believes that her ideas are still very reliable. Let's go, the people in front should have gathered feathers. If the Millennium Dragon is here, according to the rumors in the village, it will appear. If it does not appear, it means two problems. The first question is that the words of the people in the village are all rumors and cannot be verified. Second, the Millennium Dragon has left the battleship island. No matter which outcome, it is not a good thing for us. Li Ang looked at the crowd in front and said. According to the old woman, since all the feathers of the Millennium Dragon are gathered, naturally, the Millennium Dragon should appear. With the dignity of the dragon, it is natural that the mere humans are not allowed to get their own feathers. In particular, the Millennium Dragon still values its own feathers. They're going to keep going forward. Hancock's delicate face showed some anticipation, said. We're following too. Li Ang led the girls beside him, step by step to the position of the crowd in front. Following behind the crowd, it was unobstructed all the way. Of course, even the feathers were scoured clean, and not a single feather was left for Li Ang. Ow! A beast roared, causing confusion in the crowd ahead. But soon, someone killed the beast with a knife. The chaotic abort, a blip, didn't get much attention. The body of the beast was left in place, and no one wanted to take it away. Maybe in the past, they would make 723 for food, but now they have more important things to do. Naturally, he would not carry the corpse of this beast as a burden. Soon, Li Ang followed, walked to the corpse of the beast, and glanced at it. It was a beast similar to a wolf. As usual, the smell of blood should attract the beasts. But now, that's not the case. This can explain some problems. These small details are all seen by Li Ang. What's wrong? On the side, Tautu looked at Li Ang with some doubts and asked. She saw some slight changes in Li Ang's expression. It's nothing, just keep going. Li Ang shook his head, his eyes twinkling brightly, and said. He led the girls to follow behind the crowd again, without falling out of the ranks. He found a problem. Is this forest too quiet? Apart from the occasional little beast, nothing else happened. The forest that the village thinks is very fierce, only looks like this. Or is it that there are too many people here to scare away the beasts that should be? The idea was quickly ruled out, and some little beasts wouldn't have appeared if scared off. And the appearance of these little beasts is more like, deliberately arranged. Chapter 851 _ Deer. Why deliberately arrange the appearance of the little beast? To numb people's senses. Li Ang's mouth moved slightly, and he whispered to himself. If there are no beasts in the forest, this is where people feel weird. In order to prevent people from discovering this, there are deliberately arranged little beasts. If this is the case, it means that this forest has a master. This master is arranging all this. Of course, this is just Li Ang's guess. Maybe it's all just a coincidence. Hope, it's just a coincidence. Li Ang's face was calm, looking at the crowd in front of him getting deeper and deeper, his eyes twinkling brightly. The crowd still hadn't noticed this, and were even elated, thinking it was going too well. Aside. Tautu thoughtfully looked at the forest, leaned beside Li Ang, and whispered, 5 Sanchi, there is something weird here. Almost. Li Ang smiled and didn't care. Even if it's weird, he doesn't really care too much. At best, nothing more than that. Are we still to follow in their footsteps? Tautu further thought for a while and asked. Of course, there are people out for us, so why waste our time? Li Ang smiled and continued. For the strangeness of the forest, he was not nervous at all, just curious, what was arranging everything. If you guessed correctly, if there is really something that arranges all this, then this thing must be the god of the forest as the villagers call it. God of the forest, it's really exciting. Li Ang's eyes were lost, and his face was full of interest. They seemed to have stopped. At this moment, Hancock moved his pretty face, looked forward, and said softly. Have you found it again? The girls all expressed curiosity and could not help asking. They seem to be in trouble. It's not the Millennium Dragon, it's other animals. It's no wonder that people in the village think there is a forest god here. After all, it's really not easy for animals with human intelligence. Li Ang's expression is very mysterious, said. The god of the forest, is it an animal? The girls were stunned, and looked at Li Ang in amazement. At least, what they thought in their heads, the god of the forest, should be a human, and it was a human with devil fruit. It is because of this that some villagers who have never seen the world think they are gods. In fact, they are just stronger people. Watch quietly. Li Ang looked forward and said in a low voice. After he finished speaking, he didn't speak again, his eyes fixed on the crowd in front of him. At the same time, the crowd was in chaos, and a noise came out. The reason for them to stop was that an animal appeared in front of them. This is a deer, the antlers are very strange, and the soldiers are divided into 2 sides. The whole body is snow white, and it is very large compared to ordinary deer. It is only about 1 meter in size. Like, young children among deer. What is this? I've never heard of snow white deer. I don't know, but have you noticed that it only uses 2 feet to walk? My goodness, the deer has become a sperm. It's walking on 2 feet. What is this? Wait, isn't it what the villagers call the god of the forest, right? But it doesn't seem to have much lethality. Why, let the people in the village be so afraid. It's like a god. Quote. The crowd was noisy, and they looked at the snow-white deer in confusion. Chapter 841-a deer. NLT, 49 and GT. The crowd was noisy, and they looked at the snow-white deer in confusion. The deer is also looking at the crowd, with humanized emotional fluctuations in his eyes, contempt. That's right. It is defying the crowd in front of it. It is as if it thinks that it is high above, and the human beings in front of it are just its servants. A young man looked at the little deer and wondered, I suspect that I was despised by this little deer. I am very aggrieved and helpless. He had experienced a lot of being despised by others, but it was the first time he had been despised by a deer. This little deer seems to have spirituality. The rest of the people opened their mouths and said, it can stand and walk, and it has opened its intelligence. Could it be that it has eaten a devil fruit? A young strong man's pupils shrank, he couldn't help but blurt it out. Devil fruit ability. Everyone was stunned, and their expressions were full of fear and shock. Immediately, they did not dare to act rashly. After all, the deterrent power of a devil fruit person to them is self-evident. Swish swish. There were strange sounds around. A voice screamed, we are surrounded. What? What's the matter? Everyone looked around, and after seeing the scene, their hearts were completely cold, their lips trembled, and they dared not say a word. Silence. The atmosphere became extremely depressing, and filled the audience with a chilling air. Around the crowd, at some point, a group of beasts had appeared, eyeing them. There are wolves, tigers, snakes, etc. There are countless beasts. In the past, no one could believe that these different kinds of animals would actually join forces. But seeing today's pictures, they will no longer doubt the authenticity of these things. What they saw was the scene of these animals joining forces. What the hell is going on here? A strong man looked terrified and held a blood-stained knife. This knife was the weapon he used to kill the other beasts just now. The smell of blood filled the air, causing these beasts to show their teeth and claws, and their eyes flashed fiercely, which was very attractive. From the beginning, we were fooled. Suddenly, a young man realized and lost his voice. The beast we killed was arranged by someone. Then, we entered the encirclement of the beast unknowingly. Who is it? The person next to him shouted angrily. It's me. A voice echoed in the ears of everyone in the crowd. Who? Everyone looked around and saw no trace of anyone's existence. Don't look, I'm in front of your 1.1. It's this voice again. The crowd was sensational, and the eyes were unconsciously fixed on the position in front of them. I see. Snow White deer, facing them head-on, with a pair of eyes full of spirituality, with a proud gesture. Moreover, what is even more terrifying is that it actually spoke in front of everyone's eyes. My God, what the hell did I see? A deer can speak. Could it be that it really ate a devil fruit? It's not fair. I've never seen a devil fruit before. How can a deer eat a devil fruit? Quote. There are many people with embarrassment and jealousy on their faces. Was a commotion. The Snow White deer was unmoved, stared at the crowd, and said lightly, I am not a deer, a human being. You can hear it clearly. I am the God here. Chapter 852 _ Excuse me, let me ask something. The God of the forest. A young man's expression changed slightly and he blurted out. From the mouths of the villagers, I learned that there is a God in this forest. It is worshipped by the villagers as the supreme existence of Battleship Island. But I didn't expect that the God of the forest was actually a deer. But then again, this deer is very magical. Not only does it have a unique appearance, but its behavior is very similar to a human being. Standing and walking, spitting people out. Is this what an animal can do? The answer, of course, is impossible. Unless, eat devil fruit. This has been confirmed by the crowd and others. This deer definitely ate a devil fruit, otherwise it would not be so human-like. You are still sensible. Don't you know that so many people entering my territory will be punished by God? The Snow White deer looked at the crowd in front of him with contempt, and his voice was flat. Whatever the God of the forest, everyone, join me and kill 09. A strong man with a bad temper, holding a blade, rushes forward swiftly. Humble human beings. The Snow White deer raised his head proudly and sneered. The herd of beasts surging, wild beasts attacked the position of the strong man, and after a while, the strong man was eaten with only one bone left, and the scene was extremely bloody. Many people in the crowd had already vomited. They have killed people, but they have never seen the tragic appearance of people being eaten by animals. Silence. The crowd dared not act rashly. Although they don't know why, they can be sure that the Snow White deer in front of them has the ability to command the herd. Looking around, the herd surrounding this place, at least, will not be less than 10,000. And they are only a few hundred people, and it is absolutely impossible to fight against these at least 10,000 beasts. If they act rashly, the lessons from the past are in front of them. Like the strong men, they will be eaten into a skeleton. I warned you, but you didn't listen. The Snow White deer took a step, just like a human being, standing on 2 feet and walking around spiritually. Looking at its walking posture, it is indistinguishable from humans, with a unique charm. Its voice was obviously young, and it was similar to that of a little girl, soft and crisp. But no one will be deceived by its appearance. This is a real executioner. Most of the people who entered the forest race were definitely killed by it. You said, how do you want to die? The snow-white deer despised everyone and said lightly. We don't dare, please let us go. The crowd was chaotic for a while, and a young man walked out and said very sincerely. Faced with the siege of tens of thousands of beasts, they held weapons in time, and there were hundreds of people in the lineup, and they had to surrender. It's all here, and it's so easy to leave. Then you kill our people all the way, what's this? I'm just taking revenge. The snow-white deer's tone did not have any emotional fluctuations, and a chilling air permeated. The beast roared, and the entire forest seemed to be shaking. It's you. You arranged it. The crowd was angry and suddenly woke up. The beasts along the way were arranged by the snow-white deer in front of him. Visible. From the very beginning, the other party had made a plan to surround them. And they were actually foolishly hooked. Yes, I arranged it. Chapter 842 Excuse me, I'm asking something. Yes, I arranged it. The snow-white deer nodded lightly, telling him very spiritually and frankly. It didn't lie, and perhaps, in its view, lying is not necessary at all. The group of humans in front of it, in its view, is already in its bag. You beast, your heart can be punished. A young man was furious and rebuked. Oh. The snow-white deer's eyes exuded a cold glow, under its command. The herd was surging, and some wild beasts appeared, sieging and killing the young man. After a while, the young man turned into a pair of bones, shocking the audience. No one in the crowd dared to talk nonsense again, and 2 people in a row were eaten. If they talked again, I was afraid that the next person to be eaten would be themselves. In this situation, no one dared to act rashly, and could only wait nervously for the words of the snow-white deer. Humble human beings, you are here to find that dragon, right? Snow-White Fawn continued to speak. Crowd was surging, and someone put his head on his head and said, that's right. Unfortunately, there are no dragons here. Do you think that feathers can really attract a 1,000-year-old dragon? It has long since passed away. Even if you collect more, it will be meaningless. However, there is a keel, and it's still a complete keel. How about it? Are you excited? It's a pity that it belongs to me. This is a good thing for me to enhance my vitality. And you, does this count as robbing me of something? The snow-white deer continued to speak, the murderous intention was quite obvious. The keel. Everyone swallowed their saliva, and there was a sense of greed in their hearts. However, feeling the beasts around them, they suppressed the greed in their hearts, and there was a bit of fear in their eyes. If they can get out of here, they are bound to gather more people to come here to sweep. What forest god? In the face of absolute power, it is also vulnerable. Want to take my stuff? Die. The snow-white deer's eyes exuded a cold light, and he reprimanded in a cold voice. It saw the people in the crowd, and let it catch the greed that flashed in its eyes. It believes that its most precious thing is coveted by others. This is absolutely unforgivable, these people must die. Go. Snow-White Road gave the order coldly without reservation. Ow. Rip rip. Beasts surged, wolves roared in the herd, snakes spun silk, constantly approaching, facing hundreds of people, surrounded and killed. The beasts are dispatched, and the earth is shaking. Hundreds of people were terrified and watched helplessly. The scene of being surrounded by beasts really hit their hearts. No, no, we don't want your keel, please let us go. There are too many beasts, and we can't finish killing them. The beasts of this forest are probably all concentrated here. From the very beginning, this damn deer wanted to kill us. Damn it, how could I die in this ghost place? I'm not convinced. Quote. The crowd was noisy, and various voices came out. They were not reconciled and died in this remote forest. In particular, they have already learned of the existence of the keel, which is even more unwilling. Ow! The beasts surrounded and killed the crowd, and the snow-white deer looked at such a scene with great satisfaction, with a strong murderous intent and arrogance in his eyes. Just when they're ready to do it. A voice, remembered behind the ears of the white deer, made it jolted all over. Xiaolu, excuse me, let me ask you something so that I won't waste your time. Chapter 853 _ It seems that the overlord has a higher tone. Little deer. Immediately afterwards, the snow-white deer became angry. It has stated that it is a god in this forest. Who dares to talk to himself like that? Actually, you still call yourself a deer. Simply, God hates it. It turned its head and looked behind him. At some point, a young man, carrying a group of women, stood in front of it. The young man smiled, without any sense of tension. Human, are you impatient to live? The snow-white deer stared coldly at Liang in front of him and questioned. Xiaolu, don't be so irritable, tell me, where is the keel you mentioned just now? I'm kind, maybe I'll let you go. Liang smiled and continued. You want the keel too? The snow-white deer's eyes are full of cold light, this is what it values most, and it is the foundation of its strength and evolution. Anyone who wants a keel will never let the other party live. Just like the crowd not far away, it was being attacked by the beasts it summoned, causing heavy casualties. Yes, the keel is very useful to me. Why don't you give it to me? Liang nodded and said. You human, you are too greedy. The voice of the snow-white deer was slightly immature, but it had a strong murderous intent. Anyway, you just picked up a ready-made one. I think it's a matter of course for me to get it again. I think you should agree with this. Liang narrowed his eyes slightly and said. Human, I can't give you the keel. Besides, you are a dead person next. Dead people take the keel. This is a joke. The snow-white deer immediately summoned a group of beasts to attack Liang's location. Your fruit ability is interesting. Liang smiled even more when he saw the beast attack, and said, you can actually command the beast, and you can also learn how to walk upright and speak human beings. Your devil fruit is really strange. What devil fruit? I'm a god, this is what I was born with. If you're just talking about your face, I think you're the last person I've ever seen with a face. Oh no, it's an animal. Humans, die. Snow-white deer was angry, seeing Liang talking to him so frivolously, his mood was naturally not much better. Immediately, several ferocious beasts attacked Liang. The snow-white deer seemed to be winning, and there was a strong arrogance in his eyes. Who gave you the right to be a god? But after eating a devil fruit, you still dare to think that you are a god. You know, even I dare not say that I am the god of this world. And what are you? Liang glanced at the snow-white deer and said lightly. Human, you be damned. The snow-white fawn was furious and roared. I didn't want to do it at first, but since you have already done it, I can't fall behind. For the time being, I can't kill you. After all, only you know where the keel goes. Liang thought for a while and touched his chin. Feeling the attacking beast, he was indifferent. A vicious wolf, with its fangs open, snapped at his head. Boom! A crisp voice came out. Ooh tilde. Tears flowed out of the wolf, and at a glance, its teeth were actually broken, and its mouth was full of blood. It looked very embarrassed, and it was not too painful. And Liang's head was completely intact. A mere ordinary beast also wants to attack Liang. Liang's skin is not something that ordinary beasts can break. You. The snow-white deer's pupils shrank, slightly sluggish. Then it ordered the rest of the beasts to attack again. Chapter 853 _ It seems that the overlord has a higher tone. And GT, page 1/2. Please click the next page to continue reading. Then it ordered the rest of the beasts to attack again. A snake swooped towards Liang, its fangs with venom, biting against Liang's left foot. Click. The poisonous snake burst into tears and escaped the pain. Your own fangs, your own fangs. At a glance, even the fangs of the poisonous snake were broken and fell to the ground. Not only did they not cut Li Ang's skin, but Li Ang's clothes could not even be bitten. This time, the poisonous snake has some doubts about life. Is his fangs really so unbearable? I'll pay for getting my clothes dirty. Take the keel, what do you think? Dear. Li Ang looked at the snow-white deer with a smile and said. Impossible. The snow-white deer was shocked, stepped back half a step, and let out a shrill cry. It uses its own abilities. At the same time, after the sound came out, the beasts of the original crowd rushed to Li Ang's position. The smell of blood was extremely strong, and a chilling air permeated. There were less than 100 people left in the crowd left on the spot. The rest of the people were dead and wounded. Under the siege of wild beasts, there were still so many survivors, which was quite remarkable. Beast, why did you retreat? Wait a minute, they're going to protect the deer. Next to the deer, there is a young man. My God, are the beasts going to besiege that young man? He's too unlucky. How could the snow-white deer summon so many beasts? Quote. The crowd was sighing, and some people were injured, lying on the ground with faint pains. They invariably looked at the scene ahead. When I saw such a beast, ready to surround a young man, my whole heart was cold. In their opinion, this young man is sure to die. Hundreds of them were surrounded, and 2/3 of them died, not to mention that the person surrounded by beasts this time was only one person. Take advantage of this opportunity, let's run away. A young man moved his lips slightly and said in fear. He was so frightened, he didn't want to experience the second time in his life what it was like to be surrounded and killed by wild beasts. If it wasn't for a young man, he helped them divert the sight of the beast. I'm afraid that all the hundreds of them will have to die here. Human, you die for me. The snow-white deer looked at Li Ang and roared. A group of beasts, under its command, swiftly attacked Li Ang's position. In all directions, the wild beasts were so black that it was impossible to see how many types of beasts were there, and how many beasts were there in total. However, facing the attack of so many beasts, Li Ang was still unmoved, and even the smile on his face was still bright and not panic at all. I really looked down on me, and I actually dispatched so many beasts. Li Ang sighed slightly. If that's the case, then I can't let you down. Finished talking. There was a terrifying aura about him. Buzz. Li Hao Hao. The domineering look of the overlord filled the air, and suddenly spread out from his body, covering the audience. This is. The snow-white deer's eyes widened, and involuntarily, it almost felt like it surrendered to Li Ang's feet. Then, it saw a scene that it couldn't believe in its entire life. These tens of thousands of beasts were in the middle of besieging Li Ang, and fell directly to the ground, foaming at the mouth. Not a single beast was an exception, all fell to the ground. Thump, thump, thump. One after another, the beasts fell to the ground one after another, and the scene was extremely frightening. There was no attack, but the beasts just fell. What a bizarre method this is. This method made the snow-white deer feel even more chilled and terrified. All fell down. It seems that the domineering look of the overlord has turned up a bit. But it's good. The client, oh no, the deer involved was not knocked out by my overlord. Li Ang smiled, and after seeing all the beasts attacking fell down, he fixed his sight on the snow-white deer. Chapter 854_familiar back. The snow-white deer was frightened, and there was a strong sense of fear in his eyes. In particular, seeing the scene where this group of beasts all fell down, they simply defeated the greatest reliance in their hearts, and their confidence and arrogance in their hearts naturally collapsed. Li Ang's overlord color, and even the group of people, were directly impacted and fainted. Here, there are still Li Ang and the girls, and the snow-white deer has not fainted. Of course. The snow-white deer didn't faint, that's because Li Ang was under control. Otherwise, with its cowardly body, it would be too difficult to resist Li Ang's overlordism. Okay, the trouble is solved. Li Ang waved his hand, walked to the side of the snow-white deer, and said with a smile, then, the business is here. Tell me, where is the keel? The snow-white deer shivered, took a few steps back, and looked at Liang in horror. It was so scary. Nothing was done, and the tens of thousands of beasts fell to the ground. This kind of unpredictable ability and means is something that even at 09 can't believe. You are so timid as a mouse, you dare to call yourself a god. It's a joke. Liang let out a laugh, looking at the frightened appearance of the snow-white deer, and couldn't help but laugh. Fortunately, there are not too strong outsiders in Warship Island on weekdays, otherwise, with its weak strength, I am afraid that it will not be killed on the spot. Just like some pirates with a bounty of tens of millions of berries, they can make a fortune in the East China Sea, but when they enter the Great Waterway, they are the ones at the bottom. Snow-white deer on the Warship Island, it can be said that he has a good ability. But unfortunately, if you look at the whole sea, you can't count the people who can kill it. Any pirate with a bounty of tens of millions of berry can kill it like a chicken. With this little strength, you dare to call yourself a god. You, human, what kind of monster are you? The snow-white deer looked at Liang and said in horror. Monster, that's what people call me. I feel more like a god than you. If there's a god in this world, then I'm a god. Liang said with a smile. In this regard, the snow-white deer did not dare to refute. Liang's strength casts a heavy shadow on it. Especially at that moment, the scene that made countless herds crash to the ground, it felt that this was the most frightening thing it had ever seen in its life. Take me there and find the keel. Liang looked at the white deer and said. I don't know. The snow-white deer shook his head, his voice was like that of a little girl. Then I can only say sorry to you. I want to kill you. It's a pity, but since you're useless, it's easier to kill you. Liang talked with a smile, not showing mercy at all because of Snow White's age. Snow White Fawn is very smart, very smart. Therefore, he will not think that the other party will tell him frankly. The keel is the only item I have evolved. If it is given to you, I want to evolve, and there is no chance. Please, leave the keel to me, I need it more than you. The snow-white deer said pitifully, and it also learned to be pitiful. This is a very clever little deer. Naturally, Liang would not be easily fooled, and shook his head. If you evolve or not, what's the matter with me? I only want the keel. If you can't get it, then you will die here. I'll find the keel myself. You would never have found it without my guidance. The snow-white deer had a heavy tone and assured. It doesn't matter, I have time until the day I find it. But fate, only once. You think carefully. If you don't lead the way, then I can only kill you. Liang waved his hand and said very calmly. The snow-white deer looks quite cute, but unfortunately, he is not in the mood to appreciate it. What he wants is a keel. Human, you will be condemned. Snow White Fawn was very angry and said solemnly. Chapter 854-familiar back. Snow White Fawn was very angry and said solemnly. It depends on whether the sky can take me away. If it sends thunder, I can also disperse the thunder. Unlike you, it is pitifully weak. Even my own life cannot be controlled by my own hands. Liang glanced at the snow-white deer and continued, have you made up your mind? If not, I'll send you out of this world. No, you can't do that. I am the god of the forest. Snow White Fawn took a step back in horror and lost his voice. I'm still the god of the sea, what's the use of it? If I don't have any strength, I dare to call myself a name. The villagers believe in you as a god. Do you really think you are a god? Liang said with an expressionless face. I said. The snow-white deer finally surrendered. It had to do this for its own sake. Wouldn't it be over if I did this earlier? Now, lead the way, I want to see the keel as soon as possible. Liang said with a smile. I know. Snow White Fawn was very annoyed, said. It turned around and saw the scene of the tens of thousands of beasts falling to the ground, and felt a chill in its heart. The human beside him is too monster. Without doing anything, the pack of beasts fell. What kind of ability is this? Compared to himself, obviously, the other party is more like a god. Lead the way. Li Ang pointed to the road ahead and smiled. Immediately, the snow-white deer moved, stood on both feet, and walked into the depths of the forest step by step. And Li Ang's domineering look has always stayed on the other side. As long as the snow-white deer changes slightly, Li Ang will unleash a thunderous strike. Keep up. Li Ang glanced at the girls and said. 997N. The girls nodded lightly and followed behind Li Ang. And the position directly in front was led by the snow-white fawn, and Li Ang followed the position behind the snow-white fawn without any haste. No matter what intrigues and tricks the other party has, in Li Ang's view, it seems pale and powerless. In the face of absolute strength, conspiracy and tricks are only pediatrics. And still in place. In a group of people, several people opened their eyes dimly and threw their heads. Li Ang's domineering arrogance didn't deal a big blow to them, and it was mainly aimed at that group of beasts. And they were only fainted by the aftermath of the shock. After a while, I regained a lot of energy. At the same time, they saw the fainting beast in the surrounding area, and their whole body froze on the spot. What the hell is this? Immediately, all the drowsiness disappeared. Look, the man in front is so familiar. A young man looked forward, frowning. He rubbed his eyes and looked carefully at the back of the young man in front of him. Very familiar feeling. It seems, where have you seen it? Newspapers. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. But then, his face became pale and bloodless, his lips were trembling, very dry, and he lost his voice. This person, could it be that monster whose strength is so terrifying that he has not changed? He is actually Li Ang. Chapter 855 _ The Keel of the Millennium Dragon. 10 minutes later. Li Ang looked at the snow-white deer in front of him and asked lightly, "Are you there yet?" "How can it be so fast? My old nest is still a long way from here." Snow-White Fawn was very annoyed and said, "I hope you didn't take me around in circles. If I find out, I think it would be a good thing to roast a deer to eat. What do you think?" Li Ang looked at the deer with a smile and said, "You devil." The snow-white deer shivered and said, "It's really afraid that Li Ang will bake it when he gets excited. How to say, he is also a devil fruit ability. Actually, was eaten." Thinking of this, it didn't dare to take Li Ang around long distances. This road, the reason why it didn't arrive, it also has the element of taking Li Ang around the long way. After all, the keel is too important to it. It doesn't want the keel to be taken away in front of its eyes. This is the best way for it to improve its strength. If the keel is gone, its strength will naturally decline. But when he thought that Li Ang would bake it himself, his mind didn't dare to relax. Lead the way. Li Ang naturally saw some careful thoughts of the snow-white deer, and it was because of this that he spoke to stimulate the other party. Obviously, this trick is more reliable. At this moment, the snow-white deer led the way, and did not deliberately detour. About half an hour later, Li Ang led Hancock, Tautu, Khalifa and others around him to reach a cave smoothly. "This is your old lair." Li Ang looked at the size of the hole, and then looked at the young body of the snow-white deer, a little suspicious. "This is the Millennium Dragon's cave. I just occupy its place behind." Snow-White Fawn was very angry and said bluntly, "It turns out that you are not the real master. Then why are you distressed? You are just taking other people's things. Now, I took these things and it has nothing to do with you." Li Ang narrowed his eyes slightly and said with a smile, "HMPH. Snow-White Fawn did not refute. "Here, this is not where it belongs. It's just that after the Millennium Dragon left, it came here by mistake. In fact, it is also in awe of the Millennium Dragon here. If it hadn't been found that there was no trace of the Millennium Dragon here, it wouldn't have dared to enter and live here." "Are you sure the keel is in there?" The corners of Li Ang's mouth moved slightly, and he still couldn't believe it. After all, before dying, most of the 1,000-year-old dragons will choose to return to the dragon lair. The exposed keel is very rare. I usually sleep with the smell of keel. What do you think? Snow White Fawn was very dissatisfied, said. When he thought that Liang was about to get his own keel, his mood was filled with a touch of sadness. Keel will be gone. Go in and have a look. Liang glanced at the cave and said. The entrance to the cave is very spacious, and it is precisely because of this that he thinks that this place is not suitable for the Snow White Fawn. Sure enough, the Snow White Fawn is only a latecomer. This cave, from the beginning, still belonged to the Millennium Dragon. Little deer, lead the way. Liang looked at the Snow White Deer and said. I'm not a deer, I'm a god, the god of the forest. The Snow White Deer still stubbornly believes that he is the god of the forest. Then you, the god of the forest, are weak enough. Liang laughed and said lightly. Chapter 855 _ The Keel of the Millennium Dragon. Liang laughed and said lightly. That's your monster. The Snow White Deer underestimated, moved his footsteps, and walked into the cave. Liang led Hancock and others into the cave. Hancock, Tautu, Tina and others looked around to observe the scene of the cave. Step by step into the cave. I found out that this cave is not deep, only about 100 meters away, and it is coming to an end. At the same time, there was an inexplicable smell in the air. It's not a fragrance, but it's very strange. It smells and makes people feel more comfortable. The vitality in the body seems to have increased a bit. The Snow White Deer's footsteps stopped, and his eyes also had a somewhat intoxicated expression. What appeared in front of Liang was a huge skeleton, about 4 meters in height, and about 12 meters in length. The keel. Liang's eyes flashed a little, and he said. All the women also raised their heads and looked at the skeleton in front of them in amazement. These bones are actually glowing. Like Shuyu, crystal clear and smooth. When the Snow White Deer saw the keel, he felt pity and regret in his heart. You know, after it found the keel, it was reluctant to eat a little bit, even if it was a little bit, it didn't eat it. It's just that on weekdays, it likes to lie here and sleep. And now, everything no longer belongs to it. If it knows that it has today, presumably, it doesn't need to endure it anymore, and it has long been known how much it has eaten. But now, in front of Liang, it did not dare to act rashly. The keel, still intact. Liang carefully observed the keel and came to a conclusion. He looked suspiciously at the Snow White Deer next to him. This guy didn't seem to have touched the keel. He didn't know what Snow White Fawn was doing. If he did, he would just laugh it off. Is this the keel of the Millennium Dragon? Hancock and others gradually approached the past. Looking at it up close, the color of the keel is more delicate. Liang also looked closely at the characteristics of the keel, and found that compared with the bones of some ordinary animals, there are indeed too many differences. The luster, color, taste, etc., are completely different from ordinary bones in all aspects. Is it these bones that can be eaten to increase lifespan? Also known as, can you live forever? Liang whispered to himself, looking at the huge skeleton with a smile. This time, the goal has finally been accomplished. Grind into powder, it can sell a sky-high keel, right in front of you. To be honest, he really couldn't bear to use these bones as a boat. Did it? These are all expensive keels. If it is used to make a boat, is it too violent? You shouldn't need so much, right? The Snow White Deer was almost drooling, looking at Liang and asking pitifully. All of them. Liang said firmly, glanced at the Snow White Deer, and said. Immediately, the Snow White Deer froze, staring at Liang with unkind eyes, and said viciously, You villain, can't you leave me a little bit? Who told you not to eat it before? Want it now? It's too late. With a smile on his face, Liang said, Speaking of this, I have to thank you. Thank you for helping me keep it for so long, and I can't restore it. I appreciate you very much. Hearing these words, the snow-white deer almost vomited blood. In the first place, you shouldn't be so greedy. I want to stay longer and eat a little bit more every day. It's gone now, it's all gone. Chapter 856_Toxic. Knowing this, it certainly wouldn't keep the keel for so long. Even, it was directly wasted, and it didn't want to see the picture of the keel being taken away by others. I regret that at the beginning, the keel was kept so intact. Husband, this keel is not quite right. Shalulia Palace's pretty face moved, and she said suspiciously. What's wrong? Li Ang looked at Zaluria Palace and asked. I see. Shalulia Palace pointed to the keel and pondered. It stands to reason that if this is a 1,000-year-old dragon, its corpse is decaying too fast, right? What do you mean? Li Ang thought about it for a while, and this was indeed the truth. With the vigorous vitality of a 1,000-year-old dragon, even if it dies in old age, it is impossible for the body to decay within a certain period of time. But now, the 1,000-year-old dragon keel in front of them, on the contrary, seems to have been dead for more than a year. I feel that this 1,000-year-old dragon is weird. Shalulia Palace hesitated and explained, it's just, what's so weird, but I can't find any answers. Shaolu, how long has this 1,000-year-old dragon existed? Li Ang looked at the snow-white deer beside him and asked. Hearing this, the snow-white deer snorted proudly and did not answer. Roasted deer are delicious. 163. The corner of Li Ang's mouth raised an arc, and said with a smile. I've taken it, did I say it's not enough? The snow-white deer glared at Li Ang and replied sullenly, that's how it was when I came here. This 1,000-year-old dragon, I'm afraid it's been a while since it died. Really, but what do I think, this keel seems to have just died some time ago. If it is kept for a long time, it should be contaminated with a lot of different breaths. Li Ang narrowed his eyes slightly, carefully looking at the skeleton of this keel. Hancock, Tautu, and Tina all watched carefully. They also wanted to see the difference in the keel. But unfortunately, no matter how they observed, they couldn't notice what was different about the keel. Color. Li Ang's eyes flashed, his brows raised, and he said in a low voice. Color, what's wrong? The snow-white deer also showed a suspicious expression and asked. Although it doesn't want to see Li Ang get the keel, but there is a problem with this keel, it will also feel more heartache. The color is not right. Li Ang observed the color of the bones very carefully, and sure enough, he found a clue. Ajdi. What's wrong? Why can't I see it? The snow-white deer was even more puzzled and shook his head. If you could see it, I would have found it long ago. Li Ang glanced at the snow-white deer and said lightly. You're despising me, right? I see it, you must be despising me. You villain, if I hadn't been able to beat you, I would have killed you 100%. The snow-white deer was angry, his hair stood up, and he reprimanded. But unfortunately, you can't beat me. And I can kill you easily. If you don't give me a break, I don't mind letting you suffer. Li Ang looked at the snow-white deer again and said, if you think my words are just casual words, you can give it a try, I don't mind. Immediately, the snow-white deer withered away, not daring to say a word, and could only underestimate it in a low voice. At this time. Chapter 856_Toxic. At this time. Li Ang looked at the keel in front of him, his face was a little regretful, he shook his head and said, this keel, I'm afraid, can't be eaten. Oh, why? Hancock's beautiful eyes flashed, very suspicious. I don't know if it's the reason or the enemy. However, I prefer the former. It doesn't want to be eaten by humans, so it chooses to destroy its own bones. This is an old dragon. It knows that it can't leave this island, and it is impossible to return to the dragon's lair. However, it is not reconciled. After it dies, it becomes human food. Faced with this predicament, it came up with a solution. It was this solution that made the keel completely lose its proper function. Li Ang explained slowly and sighed. However, he doesn't need to fear the effect of the keel. Anyway, he is invulnerable to all poisons. The keel, poisonous. Li Ang finally spoke and gave the answer. Toxic. The girls were shocked, and their beautiful eyes looked round at the shiny white keel, and some couldn't believe it. Even the snow-white deer was startled. It swallowed and looked at the smooth keel with a chill. Poisonous. It didn't even find it. This keel is actually poisonous. Fortunately, I didn't eat it myself. Otherwise, I'm afraid, I don't know where I died. It did not doubt the authenticity of Li Ang's words in the slightest, and in this case, the other party had no need to lie. It's getting old, and it doesn't want its bones to be eaten by other life. So, it simply kills itself, takes the most severe poison by itself, and then goes back to the cave to die. Without rescue, the poison has spread to its bones. Therefore, after it died, the body decayed very quickly. Moreover, the keel left now cannot be eaten by humans. It can be seen that its determination is quite large. In order to prevent others from eating its own bones, it is really emotional to swallow the poison itself. The corner of Li Ang's mouth moved slightly, observing the trace of dark material on the keel, and explained. Not surprisingly, these substances are highly toxic. Moreover, the poison that has penetrated deep into the bones. Presumably, before the old dragon died, his body was also suffering from a strange torture. The purpose is to ensure that after death, even if there is life to eat his bones, he will be buried with it. This idea is quite scary. If you don't know it, if you eat the keel, I'm afraid that it will really follow it and leave this world. It can make the 1,000-year-old dragon penetrate the poison in its bones. One can imagine how violent it is. This dragon. The snow-white deer looked at the keel with a bit of anger in his eyes, and said in a low voice. Fortunately, it didn't eat it by itself, and now it's a little fortunate. If you eat it yourself, will it also become a skeleton? Thinking of this, it shuddered, and there was a sense of fear in its eyes that could not be concealed. I have to say that this old dragon's thinking is to lose both sides, and it is not cheap to anyone. Not everyone can do this kind of belief. Originally, there were few keels left by the 1,000-year-old dragon, and these first-class dragons, before dying, would actually eat the poison they looked at to destroy the value of their keels. This makes the keel even rarer. Hancock and others, I'm afraid they can't eat these keels. The poison contained in these keels is too violent. On the contrary, Li Ang, who has the ability to be invulnerable to all poisons, can use the keel directly as food without worrying about the poison in the keel. But other people don't have his ability. Chapter 857 Deer's Heartache. I didn't expect that its consciousness was so deep. Hancock sighed slightly and said slowly. It doesn't make much difference to her whether to eat keel or not. She just wanted to come here to simply see the species of Millennium Dragon. Now, knowing that the Millennium Dragon is about to die, he must destroy his own keel. It can be seen that at that time, it had reached what level, and what kind of thoughts did it dare to do such a move. Yes. Tautu, Khalifa and others were also moved. Even death is not cheap in other people's hearts. Let the keel here be useless directly. Fortunately, you didn't eat it, otherwise, you would have a skeleton left. Li Ang glanced at the snow-white deer beside him and smiled. I hate it. The snow-white deer roared with a painful expression on his face. Looking at such a perfect keel, I didn't expect it to be poisonous. This makes it acceptable. The keel is not only useful to people, but also has a fatal temptation to animals. Unfortunately, these keels are actually poisonous. This makes the snow-white deer suffer. The feelings, the keel it has been guarding, is actually a pile of useless bones. Poisonous keel, and it still contains highly poisonous, it naturally dare not take it easily. Although he can make himself stronger, his life is likely to be lost. Would you like to try? Li Ang looked at the snow-white deer with a smile and said, if you want, I can give you a little keel and let you eat it to see what side effects it will have. You think I'm stupid. The snow-white deer shouted in exasperation, said. It must not dare to eat it. Once it is eaten, it may die. For its own little life, it has always been quite cherished. There are very few animals who can become their own appearance. Therefore, it will face anyone with a proud look. It seems that you are not stupid, and I want you to help me see how violent the poison is. The corners of Li Ang's mouth moved slightly, shaking his head a little boringly, and said. Your heart is too cruel. The snow-white deer gritted his teeth and waited fiercely for Li Ang, saying. I give you benefits, you don't want it yourself, how come you still blame me? Li Ang waved his hand and said innocently. Then why didn't you tell me that you wanted to give me some when you didn't discover that these keels were poisonous? Now that you know that they are poisonous, you want me to try it, I won't do it. The snow-white deer was still angry, said. That's really a pity. Li Ang walked to the position of the keel and carefully observed the many positions of the keel. Even if it is highly poisonous, he believes that there must be some places that are not eroded by the highly poisonous. The keel is too big, it is impossible for the plot to spread all over the body, and there must be vacancies. For example, the position of the finger should not be spread by the poison, right? Holding such emotions, Li Ang observed the skeleton of the entire keel during the period, and observed the position of the tail from the beginning. Not to mention, let him find some non-toxic locations. I'm afraid that there is only such a little position left for the keel, which is not poisonous. This position is naturally the tail. The tail has very few bones and is covered with more feathers, so it looks very strong. But in fact, the bones of the tail are only a little bit. Probably, the length is about 2 meters, and the width is less than 10 centimeters. As a dragon's tail, the bones of this proportion are obviously relatively small. This should be the only place without toxicity. Li Ang narrowed his eyes slightly, pulled out the tail of the keel, and said. Really? Chapter 857_Deer's Heartache. Really? The first to react was the snow-white deer. It moved to Li Ang's position excitedly, and looked at the tail with burning eyes. If it hadn't taken into account the terrifying strength of Li Ang beside him, I'm afraid, it would have already started. What are you excited about? It's not for you. Li Ang glanced at the snow-white deer and said lightly. You. The snow-white deer was angry, gnashing his teeth, but there was nothing he could do. I'll give you a share if you want. Of course, I'm not sure if the tail keel is poisonous or not. You can take a gamble, what do you think? Li Ang looked at the snow-white deer and continued. Suddenly, the snow-white deer hesitated. If you don't, it's my fault. Li Ang said very calmly. To be honest, he only has an 80 to 90% chance of confirming that the keel of the tail is not poisonous. So, he needs an animal as a test subject. Naturally, the snow-white fawn is the most suitable. It is understandable that the other party does not agree. It's a big deal, just find some animals to experiment with. Not necessarily, the snow-white deer is required to personally confirm this keel. How sure are you that this keel is non-toxic? The snow-white deer hesitated, looked at Li Ang, and said. 80 or 90%. Li Ang said bluntly without fooling the snow-white fawn. Okay, I tried it. Snow-white fawn nodded solemnly and said. Give. Li Ang cut off the keel about the size of his thumb and handed it to the snow-white deer. When the keel was cut off, it made him feel more comfortable. Although it is a pity, these keels are highly poisonous. However, the toughness of the keel can definitely be used as the material of the ship. Since the keel is poisonous, naturally, it no longer has any value. It is the best choice to use as the material of the boat. The snow-white deer took the keel and put it to his mouth. He was a little nervous and bit down. Click. Ah! The snow-white deer screamed in pain, and at a glance, its mouth was full of blood. Several teeth are broken. Forget, the hardness of the keel is not something you can eat. Li Ang scratched his head and couldn't help laughing. You must have done it on purpose, it must have been on purpose. The snow-white deer glared at Liang and said. It hastily spit out the keel in its mouth. Is it good, stained with blood, making it look particularly embarrassed. It really did not expect that the keel was so hard. Several of its teeth were stretched, but on this keel, there was not even a trace of bite. It was completely smooth like jade, and there was no sign of damage. How am I supposed to eat this? The snow-white fawn was in pain, and his mouth was full of blood. But what makes it even more painful is that the keel in his hand is actually inedible by himself. This is simply too painful. Knowing the benefits of the keel, it is helpless. I couldn't eat it, I couldn't stop biting. It was very anxious, and the bloody smell in its mouth filled its heart, making it very painful. Could it be that today is your unlucky day? How come so many unfortunate things happened? Holding the keel in his hand, the snow-white deer can only stare, wanting to eat, but dare not eat. That anxious appearance, appearing on the body of a deer, looks a bit funny. It really makes people laugh. Chapter 858 _ Invite others to try the toxicity. Eat. Liang smiled without concealment and said. I can't eat it. Snow-White Fawn was so anxious that he could not do anything, looked at Liang, and said, I want to eat it too, but I even have several broken teeth. What can I do? You can't even eat this bit of keel, so you are still guarding so many keels. You are completely meaningless. Even if no one comes to compete with you, you can eat it. Liang looked at the snow-white deer and said with a smile. Who knows, this keel is so hard. I haven't eaten it before, but I don't know how hard a keel is. I'm afraid, it's harder than steel. Snow-White Fawn was helpless and sighed. Bring it to me. Liang glanced at the keel on the snow-white deer's hand and said. Hearing this, the snow-white deer didn't have too many ideas, and reluctantly handed the keel to Liang. I can't eat it, so what can I do? Its heart is bleeding, such a good thing, however, he can't eat it. After taking the keel handed by the snow-white deer, Liang held it in his hand and squeezed the keel into powder with a little force. Click. With a crisp voice, Liang stretched out his right hand, and the palm of his hand was full of keel powder. Completely easy, pinch the keel into powder. Aside. The snow-white deer's original sad expression suddenly turned round, staring at the powder in Liang's palm, his lips trembling, and then looking at Liang next to him, he became even more frightened. Be nice. With this slap, wouldn't he be unable to keep his body? It finally understood what a terrifying monster the humans beside him were. Even the keel with which it had broken its teeth and left no trace. It turned out to be crushed into powder by the opponent with one hand. The difference is naturally self-evident. Take it yourself. Liang casually put the powder on the snow-white deer's hand. The deer's hands are small, originally used to make hooves, but now it can walk upright, just like a human, and its forelimbs have become hands instead of feet. It held the powder tightly, for fear that the powder would be blown away by the wind. Immediately after, it swallowed, took a deep breath, and slammed the powder of the keel into its mouth. Well, it tastes pretty good. It thought to itself, and then swallowed it violently, without turning back. The importance of the keel to it is self-evident. Even if there is a 10% possibility that the keel is poisonous, it went to fight once. The keel that Liang gave it was the closest keel to the Millennium Dragon's body. Therefore, if this section of keel is not poisonous, then the remaining keel of the entire tail cannot be poisonous. It's impossible to separate a bone and appear directly in the other end of the bone, right? This is obviously unrealistic. How do you feel? Liang looked at the snow-white deer and asked. Hancock, Tautu and other girls also came closer, looking forward to the changes of the snow-white deer. After eating the keel, what changes? Everyone couldn't tell at all, they could only see it from the snow-white deer in front of him. A vigorous vitality spread out from the body of the snow-white deer. If nothing else, this should be the role of the keel. What a strong vitality. Hancock's beautiful eyes with a bit of brilliance, praised. Yeah, the keel is called, it can be immortal after eating it, and it is not groundless. This kind of effect, I am afraid that if you eat a little, it will not be a problem to be several years younger. Chapter 858 invite others to try the toxicity. Yeah, the keel is called, it can be immortal after eating it, and it is not groundless. This kind of effect, I am afraid that if you eat a little, it will not be a problem to be several years younger. Khalifa's delicate face is very serious, said. In Li Ang's sight, he watched the changes of the snow-white deer little by little. In a blink of an eye. The size of the snow-white deer seems to have improved a lot, and the vitality in the body is getting stronger and stronger. A few minutes later. Snow-White Fawn opened his eyes couldn't hide his excitement, and said, "There is no poison, this is no poison. I can feel that the life force in my body is very majestic now, and my strength has also improved a lot." Quote. It is also the first time to try the effect of keel. Sure enough, as it imagined, the effect was too obvious. Ojby. Unfortunately. Thinking of this, it eagerly looked at the rest of the keel in Li Ang's hand and swallowed. Don't think about it, give you a little sweetness, do you still want to go further? Li Ang's face was calm, and he said lightly. Immediately, the snow-white deer narrowed his gaze, a little scared. After all, it can eat the keel, and it is all thanks to Li Ang. Otherwise, with the hardness of the keel, even if it swallowed the whole keel, it would have to digest at least for a long time. And if it is a powder, the absorption will be much faster. The scene of Li Ang crushing the keel into powder is vivid in his mind. That power, if you hold your head, wouldn't it make your head explode? It shivered all over, and quickly took a small step back. It is certain that these keels are non-toxic. Li Ang held the nearly 2-meter-long keel in his hand and smiled. These non-toxic keels can be used to restore youth to the Hancock girls. As for these poisonous keels. Li Ang narrowed his eyes slightly and looked at the poisonous keels in front of him. He still had an idea, and he wanted to test how poisonous these poisonous keels were. If it really doesn't work, I'll use it to make the ship's material. However, if the toxicity is still within the acceptable range, then it is possible to cooperate with the antidote. While eating these poisonous keels, together with the antidote, the effect of toxicity can be completely ignored. So, someone has to try it. Li Ang inadvertently glanced at the snow-white deer. Aware of his gaze, the snow-white deer took a few steps back, a little frightened. It clearly felt that Li Ang's eyes were malicious, making it uneasy. If you want to fool it, it's not realistic. Li Ang shook his head, and with a flash of inspiration, he said to the snow-white deer, "I helped you to crush the keel just now, which is also a big favor for you. In this way, you should also help me to do something." "What?" The snow-white deer was very vigilant, said. It can't believe that what Li Ang makes it do is simple and easy. "I want to try to see how far the poison in this keel can reach." The corner of Li Ang's mouth raised an arc, and he smiled. "No, I don't do this kind of self-defeating thing." The snow-white deer immediately prepared to slip away, his whole body tense, and he said, "Why are you so nervous? I'm not asking you to try." Li Ang waved his hand, his eyes twinkled, and said, "I want you to lead others here, and then let others try the toxicity of the keel. I think, this matter should not be too difficult for you." Bar. This. The snow-white deer was stunned. It looked at Li Ang in astonishment. Could it be that all humans are so ruthless now? Thinking of Li Ang's methods, it shudders, it is still too tender compared to the other party's words. Chapter 859 The keel. Poisonous. How? Li Ang looked at the snow-white deer and asked. "Okay, but bring them here. Even if they see such a huge keel, they won't be able to eat it. These keels are too hard." The snow-white deer hesitated for a while, and told his inner doubts. "You can rest assured. Later, I will crush a part of the keel, and then disguise it as intact. As long as someone comes, it can be guaranteed that nothing is lost. Li Ang smiled and continued. Well then, I'll go get people over now. The Snow White deer left here immediately without thinking too much. Before that, Li Ang looked at the back of the Snow White deer and said, after this is done, I will give you the same amount of keel just now. I don't think you will refuse it. Immediately, the speed of the Snow White deer became faster. Obviously, the temptation of the keel makes it desperate. After the Snow White deer left, Li Ang also remodeled some of the human keels according to the words just now. Of course, only part of it. More keels are still very hard. After doing all this, Li Ang said to the girls, let's leave here for the time being. Get out of the cave, and then look at the strength of the poison in the keel next. Yeah. All the women nodded lightly, without any objection. Under the leadership of Li Ang, the girls also walked out of the cave, just in the direction not far from the entrance of the cave, and could clearly see everything that happened in the cave. 10 minutes later, Li Ang's eyes narrowed slightly, and he felt domineering when he heard it. The Snow White little deer was leading a group of people and came frantically. It seems that they are chasing the Snow White deer. Gradually, the Snow White deer appeared in Li Ang's sight. Sure enough, it entered the cave. And behind it, about a dozen people also entered the cave. At the same time, in the cave, bursts of excited words erupted. My God, there really is a 1,000-year-old dragon's keel here. It's too huge, with so many keels. If I sell it, I can spend 10 lifetimes, but I may not be able to spend it all. Waste, you fucking want to sell it. If there are so many keels, if we eat them, immortality is not a dream. Yes, so many keels must not be sold. When the time is right, just sell a little. But these are more, let us all eat them. Quote. Inside the cave, more than a dozen men looked excitedly at the huge keel in front of them. Suddenly, a young man had some doubts. By the way, where's the Snow White deer? Since entering here, it seems that he can't see each other. This made him feel a little suspicious. Never mind, the discovery of the keel is enough anyway. As for the deer, it escaped as soon as it escaped. Without the herd of beasts, it's simply no match for us. No, thanks to our insistence on tracking it all the way, otherwise, the keel in the cave would not have been found at all. This time, we made a fortune. The rest of the staff didn't care about the Snow White deer. On the contrary, their minds were all on the keel in front of them. Wait. A middle-aged man found another clue. He saw the position of the tail of the keel, which was cut off. Immediately, he frowned and said to the crowd, the tail of this keel seems to have been taken away by someone. Not necessarily, maybe, it was the Snow White deer that ate it. The rest shook their heads and replied. These little things can't let them worry about them. More importantly, they found this team of treasures. Keel. This is a keel. The keel of a 1,000-year-old dragon, what a precious thing. Chapter 859 _ the keel. Poisonous. And GT, page 1/2. Please click the next page to continue reading. The keel of a 1,000-year-old dragon, what a precious thing. Even if a little bit spreads out, it can be sold for a sky-high price. Thinking of this, some people can't hold back their excitement and are ready to do it. Click. A young man took out the blade and tried to cut off the keel, but he couldn't cut it. It's too hard. The rest sighed helplessly. Look, there's something ready here. Another person found a broken keel on the stone platform next to it. They walked towards the stone platform excitedly and looked at each other, unable to hide their excitement. Want to eat? One person hesitated and asked. Of course, definitely eat it and feel the effect of the keel. Yes, count me as one, don't rob me. The keels here belong to everyone, and they are divided equally. We don't need to fight at all. There are so many keels here. Even if one person is divided, it is a very huge wealth. Therefore, let's be rational first. 0 katakana middle dot 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 katakana middle dot. Don't say it, hurry up, I can't wait to try it, the effect of the keel. Quote. There were a total of 13 people in the group, and everyone put the pieces of the keel of Taisheng into their mouths. Ah, it hurts, it's too hard. Who told you to bite? Can you just swallow it? Although we can't bite, we can digest it slowly. Your head is too stiff. Yeah, I didn't expect it. Forget it, a tooth wasted. Everyone swallowed the keel. In the face of such a tempting thing as the keel, no matter how cautious they are in time, it is inevitable that they will swallow the keel and try it. The rumored keel has a terrible effect. 0. Gollum, Gollum, Gollum. No matter where you go, you swallow the keel into your belly. How does it work? I haven't digested it yet. The keel is too hard. I'm afraid it will take a certain amount of time. Several people talked in a low voice. Suddenly, a painful voice came out. Ah! A middle-aged man's eyes widened, his 7 orifices bleeding, and he fell to the ground with a thump. Before and after, less than 10 seconds. You know, the keel is so hard, how can it be digested so quickly? It can be seen that the toxicity of the keel, just a little bit, is enough to kill. Ah! Ah! There was a whimpering sound. A young man's eyes widened, he pointed at the keel, and said in a trembling voice, the keel is actually poisonous. Before he died, he never thought that the keel was actually poisonous. Isn't that what a waste of time? Until after everyone died. Outside the cave. Li Ang took the girls and the snow-white deer and gradually returned to the cave. Ground. One after another, the 7 orifices were bleeding, very ferocious and terrifying, and the death was tragic. It can be seen how violent the poison that can poison the Millennium Dragon is. Seeing the tragic death of these people on the ground, Li Ang's face was calm and he shook his head. The poison is too strong, it seems that it is impossible to eat normally. Then, these poisonous keels can only be used as materials for shipbuilding. Quote. Chapter 860 Take it away. Take the keel and build the ship. The snow-white deer's eyes were a little dull. Are ships made of such precious materials? Can't be bothered, can't be bothered. Do human beings live like this? This is the keel that it is frugal and reluctant to eat. However, the humans in front of them actually used it to build ships. It only felt that its head was a little dizzy. Do you dare to eat a poisonous keel? If you dare, why not give it to you? Li Ang glanced at the snow-white deer and said lightly. Hearing this, the snow-white deer did not dare to say a word, and looked at the keel and the corpse on the ground with deep fear and anger. Damn it! A good keel was wasted like this. These dragons are really too cunning, and before they die, no one can harvest their bones. Okay, these keels, I'm going to pack them and take them away. These, as a reward for you to help me bring people here. Li Ang staged the thumb-sized keel, threw it to the snow-white deer, and said, as for how you eat it, that's not what I need to care about. Okay. The snow-white deer gritted his teeth and nodded. It is better to have something than nothing. Although the keel is hard, it can also be eaten with some powder every day. Eats 080 at one time, it will still be reluctant. Okay, the keel here, call your subordinates to come over and help me transport it. Li Ang held the first-generation goosh, looked at the skeleton of the entire keel in front of him, and said lightly. The skeleton is too large, and if you want to carry it as a whole, it will also cause some unnecessary troubles. He is not afraid of trouble, but more trouble, still very troublesome. In particular, such an obvious skeleton will inevitably make people think it is a keel. Once the news of the keel spreads out, I am afraid that there will be a lot of desperate people to snatch his keel. So, packing and taking away can also save a lot of trouble. Are you going to cut off the keel with a knife? The Snow White Deer asked suspiciously. Can this knife really cut off a hard keel? It always feels that something is not reliable. However, the other party can crush the keel into powder with one hand, and it seems that there is no need to doubt it. Li Ang's face was calm, holding the first-generation ghost, covered with armed color, and a layer of black hard material like black jade, blessing on the bright red and demonic blade. Since the first generation of ghosts came out of the sheath, the Snow White Deer felt a deep malice, and the terrifying murderous aura enveloped the audience, making his eyes uncontrollable to show a look of fear. AJDC, it's scary. It took a few steps back and couldn't help but tremble. This murderous aura almost made it feel like he was about to die. At this moment, it was suddenly a little fortunate that there was no conflict with Li Ang. Otherwise, it will really die miserably. No one can save it. Call out, call out, call out. Li Ang waved the first-generation ghost on his hand and launched a series of sharp slashes at the skeleton of the keel. One after another bone fell to the ground. The incision was very smooth, without any damage, even the long pieces were consistent, stacked on the ground, and arranged neatly. This swordsmanship. The Snow White Deer's pupils shrank, and his heart was terrified. It has seen many people with knives, and their swordsmanship is extremely rough. However, Li Ang's swordsmanship made it feel that this should be the strongest swordsmanship in the world. It feels really good. Li Ang is indeed called the world's greatest swordsman. Let your men come over and pack it for me. In this way, no one should find out that these are keels. Li Ang glanced at the neatly arranged keels with satisfaction, and slowly collected the original ghost. Each keel is kept within 3 dimensions, one is half a meter, one is 30 centimeters, and the other is 10 centimeters. Except for the 3 dimensions, the original keel skeleton has long since disappeared without a trace. Chapter 860_Pack and Take Away. Except for the 3 dimensions, the original keel skeleton has long since disappeared without a trace. Not bad. Li Ang laughed and said to the Snow White Deer with satisfaction, by the way, what is your ability? I don't know either. Snow White Fawn shook his head. It originally ate a fruit by mistake, and then gave birth to its own wisdom. It is not clear what the specific ability is. Anyway, it has the wisdom of human beings, as well as the various behaviors of human beings. In addition, animals seem to have a natural affinity and surrender to it. Therefore, in the forest, relying on this ability, it is very prosperous. Even the villagers in the surrounding villages were stunned by its abilities. Therefore, the title of the god of the forest was born. Forget it, help me transport all these keels to the shore and send them to me on that ship. Li Ang shook his head and said bluntly. For Li Ang's order, Snow White Fawn did not dare to disobey, and immediately used his own abilities. Soon. Less than 3 minutes. A large number of animals have appeared here, most of which are huge beasts. Under the order of the Snow White Deer, the beast transported these keels to the shore according to Li Ang's order. This process did not arouse people's awareness. The forest is too big. People just live in villages, and the rest of the area is all forest. From the forest, you can reach the coast just by taking a detour, completely evading the villagers' awareness. Although Li Ang didn't worry too much, it would still be a lot of trouble if someone noticed. Rather, save the trouble and waste your time. About half an hour later. Battleship Island, coast. In a warship, animals carried the keel and transported them to the deck of the warship. They were neatly arranged on the deck, and almost the entire board was piled up. Thank you for your hard work. Li Ang and the girls stood at the fence, looking at the animals gradually exiting the warship, and laughed. You better go quickly, you monster. On the shore, the snow-white deer looked at Liang very badly and said, "Don't worry, I'll come back to see you when I get a chance." Liang laughed and said, "Please don't, I don't expect to see you again." The snow-white deer looked at Liang coldly, showing no mercy at all. If possible, it would never want to see Liang appear in front of him again in his life. This guy, Liang, caused a deep shadow in his heart. At that moment, the terrifying ability to make tens of thousands of animals lose consciousness is still vivid in their minds. It can also crush the hard keel with one hand, and hold a knife to cut the keel neatly. This kind of strength, if it is not a fool, it will understand that this guy is completely different from everyone he has seen before. This is a real powerhouse. Gradually, Liang retracted his sight, controlled the rudder, set sail, and gradually moved away from the coast of Warship Island. The whole ship gradually disappeared on the coast next to the Warship Island. And the snow-white deer on the shore, after watching Liang disappear, held the thumb-sized keel that Liang left for it, and put it away nervously. This keel is really reluctant to eat. But when he thinks that he is reluctant to eat it, maybe it will be cheaper for others in the future, his face will not turn back. In any case, a must eat a day. Go back. The snow-white deer glanced at the animals around it, and then gradually entered the forest with a group of animals.